Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case. The disturbing case of Ryan Weingarten. In the shadow of seemingly peaceful family relationships, sometimes lurk horrifying secrets. The case of Ryan Weingarten and his sister Gail is a terrifying example of human depravity. At the same time, the terrible consequences of greed and the desire to protect shameful secrets, a blood relationship turned into a nightmare. This devastating event shook an entire community and left an indelible mark. Ryan's case revolves around jealousy, a person willing to kill to keep their secrets hidden. The story takes place in Holland, Michigan, a small town known for its rich Dutch heritage and culture. The town's charm and beautiful scenery create a pleasant atmosphere. Newlyweds Gail and Rick Brink lived in a northern town that seemed perfect for they to build their future together. They were excited to begin renovating their new home. Sadly, jealousy and hidden secrets shattered that happiness. Now, let's talk about Pam, Ryan's wife. She kept a devastating secret for 25 years to protect her family, career, and reputation. The burden of hiding this truth became unbearable. And on January 18, 2013, it all came to light in front of detectives. Pam revealed the long-held secret that had haunted her out of love and fear. She allowed her husband to dominate her life. Ryan controlled whom she could talk to and even threatened her life. For 25 years, she lived in torment with the knowledge of how Gail and Rick were murdered back in time. When Gail was 19 and Rick was 22, they met at work in 1984. Rick was so taken by her that he told his mother he had found the one he wanted to marry. Gail came from a large family with 8 children and was not financially well off, but she was ambitious, determined, and knew her goals. When she met Rick, she felt it was destiny, and they formed a strong couple. They knew they needed to work together to build the life they dreamed of. Soon, Gail decided to move in with Rick, and on April 25, 1986, they got married. Just one day after Gail turned 21, they planned to purchase a house together. After their honeymoon, they returned to Michigan and began searching for a ranch-style home with 20 acres of land on the outskirts of town. This type of property was perfect for the newlyweds, who wanted to start their life together. Rick successfully negotiated with the bank and managed to buy the property at a good price. But the house required extensive repairs. Fortunately, Rick had previously trained as a carpenter's apprentice, and his skills are very useful for renovation. Gail and Rick moved into their new house in 1987 and started making repairs. On November 21, they attended the wedding of one of Rick's school friends. Enjoying time with friends, this would be the last day anyone saw them alive. By November 23, 1987, neither Rick nor Gail showed up for work, which was highly unusual as they were both dedicated employees who never missed a day. Concerned, Rick's parents were alerted by their employer about Rick and Gail's absence. Immediately, they went to Rick's home on Ransom Street. When they arrived, they found Rick's SUV still parked in the driveway. But what they discovered next left them shocked and horrified. Rick was found in the front seat with attacked by force to his head. His parents quickly called the police. The Ottawa County Sheriff's Department arrived and secured the area. Upon searching the home, they discovered Gail dead on the marital bed, her face obscured by a bloody pillow. When the pillow was taken away, police discovered that Gail had been assaulted 3 times. Both Rick and Gail had been brutally murdered. When they had only been married for 18 months, the inspection of the crime scene revealed that nothing in the home had been disturbed. This created a mystery that baffled the officers. Initially, police suspected Rick may have murdered Gail and then harmed self-harm in the car outside. However, this theory was quickly dismissed after the bodies were moved and examined. As no gun was found in the house or nearby, they then considered the possibility of a robbery. But further examination showed that all belongings were in their original places, all the money was accounted for, and there were no signs of forced entry, struggle, or any damage. Both Gail and Rick were still wearing their jewelry, and the entire house was clean, with hardly any evidence found. Here, they found no weapon at the scene. Also, could not locate the bullet casings during the search. The police found fingerprints. 4 belonged to Gail and Rick. While 2 were from an unknown source, 1 fingerprint was found on the toilet seat, and the other on the phone. The police checked these prints against their database, but found no matches, lacking physical evidence. They shifted their focus to gathering information about the victim's lifestyle and habits by interviewing friends and family. Ryan described Gail and Rick as the sweetest couple he had ever known, stating he had never seen a husband and wife get along so well. Rick's brother, Bat Brink, called the funeral an incredibly sad occasion. Gail's family, particularly her sister Cheryl and Ryan, were especially grief-stricken after the mourning period ended. The police resumed their investigation, exploring different leads, but still lacked any evidence. Multiple theories emerged, but all the leads proved fruitless and unverified. A month later, on December 24, 1987, another shocking crime occurred. Deborah and her husband were found dead in their backyard, both with their throats slit. This case bore similarities to the previous murder of Gail and Rick. Nothing was stolen. There were no signs of a break-in, and no clear motives could be identified. The remarkable point is that the two families lived only half a mile apart, raising concerns among the public and investigators. However, this connection was dismissed when differences between the two cases were identified. The murders of Rick and Gail appear to have been carried out in a premeditated manner, suggesting a planned murder. Another theory caught the attention of investigators. Gail was looking into financial irregularities at her workplace, and the dossier she took home went missing. However, this theory was eventually set aside as the police ran out of leads, and the case went cold. Despite this, the murders of Rick and Gail remained in the public's memory. In 2007, 20 years after the murders, a group of investigators established a cold case unit in the Tawa County Sheriff's Department. This unit was led by detectives Venus Repper and David Blakely. In there, the Brink murder was one of the cases they chose to investigate. Although the documents were old, they managed to recover important notes. Venus and David noticed some remarkable details. During their discussions with friends and family, they frequently heard the name of Ryan. Unlike other family members, Ryan often made bizarre comments during family gatherings. Relatives recalled that he exhibited odd behavior. For example, he once claimed to have a vivid mental image of Gail's murder, stating he could see someone walking down the hallway to her bedroom. Cheryl remembered him saying, "Sometimes I wonder if I could have done something like that." Additionally, Ryan confessed to his sister Lynn that he felt a need to apologize to Gail because he believed he had violated her during the previous investigation. Police had ruled Ryan out as a suspect due to an alibi provided by his then-girlfriend, Pam. She claimed that on the night of the murder, she was doing laundry with Ryan, and her account matched his, making his story credible. And then, it was later revealed that Pam and Ryan had actually gone to a friend's house that night to use the washing machine. Upon reviewing the reports, detectives found inconsistencies in Pam's testimony. Although Pam's testimony strongly supported Ryan's alibi, the polygraph test revealed a different story. When asked if she was with Ryan that night, Pam said no, and the polygraph indicated no deception in her response. This raised concerns, so detectives decided to investigate further by visiting Pam in the trailer park where she lived with Ryan and their children. At that time, Pam and Ryan had been married for 23 years and had 3 children together. Pam had first met Ryan in 1987 when she was a single mother with a 6-month-old baby. They married in 1990 and remained together since then. The detectives arrived at the trailer park and were greeted by Ryan. Since marrying Pam, Ryan had become a devoted husband and was actively involved in raising their children. He informed the investigators that Pam was not home, and they asked him about his account of the double murder that occurred that night. Ryan's recollection of events was quite vague. After the brief investigation, the detectives arranged to meet with Pam at the department later, but Ryan insisted on being present for the conversation. They informed him that this was not possible, as they needed to question Pam alone. Pam's account was consistent with the alibi she and Ryan had previously provided. Despite this, detectives Venus and David sensed that something was off. They were determined to investigate further, delve into Gail's and Rick's past. As they looked into Pam and Ryan's relationship, they discovered that Ryan had not always been faithful to Pam while dating her. He had also been involved with another woman, Crystal Beelan, with whom he had an unstable relationship for 4 years. She ended things with Ryan when she realized he was becoming serious with Pam. But their friendship continued. Detectives located Crystal and invited her to the department, where she agreed to come in voluntarily. The interrogation proceeded smoothly, and no incriminating evidence emerged during the conversation. However, she disclosed a significant secret that changed the direction of the case. She revealed that Ryan had previously confessed to her about an incestuous relationship he had with Gail when they were younger, a few days after the murder. Ryan had asked Crystal to drive past the crime scene, but she found it inconvenient, so they went to a nearby park instead. While at the park, Ryan expressed a need to talk and said he wanted to share a heavy secret with her. He then recounted the sexual relationship he had with Gail, claiming that it was consensual. However, he mentioned that, in his last request to Gail in the backyard, she rejected him, but he still proceeded with his intentions and forced himself on Gail. Ryan showed Crystal pictures of Gail in a bikini, expressing how he couldn't take his eyes off Gail and that he was deeply attracted to her. It seemed he was the only one aware of his feelings. One day, Rick caught Ryan staring at Gail, leading to some suspicion on Rick's part. Although he didn't confront Ryan about it, Crystal's revelation about Ryan's feelings gave the detectives a new perspective on the case, but her information wasn't sufficient, prompting the need for more investigation. To gather more details, they needed to speak with Pam. When Ryan and Pam arrived at the office, it was challenging to persuade Ryan to allow the detectives to speak with Pam privately. Eventually, he relented, and the questioning of Pam began. In Pam's testimony, she revealed that she was deeply in love with Ryan, particularly because Ryan was encouraging her and her child to move in with him. However, the situation quickly took a turn for the worse. That evening, Ryan took Pam to Gail's house, he parking in a way that would keep them hidden. He then led Pam to Rick's car. When Pam looked inside, she saw Rick's body on the front seat. Ryan didn't allow her to linger. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the house, leading her down the hallway. In the master bedroom, they have seen Gail's lifeless body, which appeared to be peacefully sleeping. Ryan picked up a pillow and placed it over Gail's face, saying, "Isn't she beautiful?" He then turned to Pam with a threatening look and warned, "If you go to the police or tell anyone what I did, this could happen to you too." Terrified, Pam fled from the house, despite the horror she had just witnessed. That night, she stayed with Ryan at his house. The next morning, they continued their lives as if nothing had happened. When Pam insisted on knowing why Ryan killed Rick and Gail, he finally confessed that he had a sexual relationship with Gail when they were younger. He was afraid that Rick might have found out about it over time. Ryan also revealed that he envied the success of Gail and Rick because he felt unsuccessful in his own life. He made money by selling small amounts of illegal substances. And after marrying Pam, she became the main provider for the family. While he stayed home to raise their children, Ryan was jealous of Gail's life and her husband, their new home. With her career, he was consumed by jealousy and resentment. Watching Gail be happy with someone else, Ryan was quickly arrested after Pam's confession, however. He maintained that he did not kill the family. He only admitted to having had a sexual relationship with his sister Gail before her marriage. The family had mixed feelings after the investigation concluded, but they were relieved that the case was closed and Ryan was in custody. The police searched Ryan's home, but did not find the murder weapon or clothing, which was expected given the time that had passed since the crime. The fingerprints from the crime scene did not match Ryan's, but the motive for the murders was compelling. As a result, Ryan was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. His trial began in March 2014 in Ottawa County Court. The prosecution argued that Ryan was driven by jealousy and feared that Gail would reveal their incestuous relationship. 60 witnesses testified against him, but it was Pam's testimony that ultimately determined Ryan's fate. In Pam's testimony in court, Ryan reacted by hurling insults at her, leading the court to reprimand him and have him removed from the courtroom. Pam recounted her troubled marriage to Ryan and described the night he took her to see the bodies of the victims. Additionally, Ryan's cellmate testified that Ryan bragged in prison about his murders and expressed a desire to kill his other sister, Cheryl. Because she was assisting in the investigation, Ryan also defended himself, but his statements were erratic and confusing. He claimed that the authorities were conspiring against him, suggesting they needed to close the case. He alleged that the police had coerced Pam into giving false testimony. On March 28, 2014, the jury reached a verdict. Ryan Weingarten was found guilty of both murder charges. During his sentencing, Ryan shouted and made threats when asked to calm down. Ryan Weingarten was ultimately sentenced to 2 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole after the trial. Cheryl expressed her feelings, stating that although she had loved her brother all her life, she now despised the person he had become. Ryan's mother never accepted the verdict and passed away in 2021 at the age of 90. Pam later divorced Ryan. He has lost all his appeals and remains imprisoned to this day, although it took more than 2 decades. The truth has finally come to light thanks to the efforts of investigators and the cooperation of those who dare to speak out. This is not only a story of paying for crime, but also a reminder that justice, however slow, can still be served when those involved continue to seek the truth. The case of Ryan Weingarten highlights the consequences of crime and also exposes the darkest corners of family relationships. Ryan's moral degradation: he killed his sister and her husband to hide his secrets, with his actions stemming from selfishness, jealousy, and sick motives. He turned his family, which should have been the safest place. Weingarten suffered emotional highs and lows throughout the sentencing, crying at points and flaring up at others. At one point, he quoted from the Bible and then exclaimed loudly that he did not commit the crime, expressing his belief that the Lord knew he was innocent and that he had only told the truth. He referred to himself as an innocent man who was shackled for no reason other than what Repper and Blakely suggested to his wife. He reminisced about the night his daughter, whom he referred to as his little angel sent down from heaven, was conceived. He encouraged his children to be good citizens, advising them not to cheat, lie, or steal, and to be good neighbors who were quick to forgive At several points during his speech, he wept, stating that he was an innocent man, stripped of his family and wife because of lies. Assistant Ottawa County Prosecutor Lee Fisher remarked that Wingarden's outburst only reinforced the opinion that he had committed the killings. Implying that he was definitely not in touch with reality, Fisher added that the conviction provided closure for both families and signified that justice had been served, allowing them to no longer wonder what had happened to their brother and Gail. "My sister's been dead for 27 years, Murphy sobbed. "Now, I can go to her grave and say goodbye. You know, we're done. We're done. We finally got him, Gail and Rick. You can rest in peace now." Detective Blakely retired shortly after the trial ended. Repper said she's not sure who her new partner or what her next cold case investigation will be, but that she hopes to continue to bring justice to victims and closure to their families. This case highlights how hidden secrets can have devastating effects. Wingarden harbored a dark secret for years before it was uncovered. It demonstrates the psychological and emotional toll of suppressing the truth and how it eventually surfaces, often with significant consequences. Wingarden's conviction was largely based on the testimony of his wife, who revealed his confession after decades of marriage. This underscores how trust in relationships can be strained when significant wrongdoings are involved. It also shows how the burden of knowledge can compel individuals to seek justice, even at personal cost. The case remained unsolved for over 20 years, until investigators revisited it using modern interrogation techniques and social dynamics. This underscores the importance of persistence and advancements in forensic science and investigation, which can bring justice even decades after a crime. The murder stemmed from jealousy and unresolved issues within the family. It serves as a reminder that family disputes, if left unchecked, can escalate into tragic outcomes. Communication and conflict resolution within families are crucial, despite the passage of time. The judicial system demonstrated that justice can still be served. This case serves as a reminder to victims' families and society that crimes will not be forgotten, and efforts will continue to uncover the truth. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nurauder family. Michelle and Lloyd Nurauder, two high school students, have a very close relationship. He was a year younger than she, but this didn't stop him from falling in love with her. They dated for 2 years and then got married. By the mid-90s, Lloyd graduated with an engineering degree and began teaching science at a university. He then worked as an engineer at a factory. Michelle pursued higher education and became an English teacher at a college. During this time, their first daughter was born, followed by 2 more daughters later on. The 90s were a period of many important changes for them. They moved to a large house in a town called Corning, near New York. They appeared happy. Lloyd works very hard but still makes time for his family, especially his 3 daughters. Michelle was positive and energetic, managing the household and caring for the children. As a teacher, she also educated their children at home. Together, they formed an ideal family, admired by many of their acquaintances. Over time, Lloyd's behavior changed significantly. He used to be a caring father and husband, but then he began to act in a patriarchal manner, manipulating his family to control them. He demanded complete obedience to the rules he set. If there is a conflict, he is willing to use force to force his wife and children to agree with his point of view. This caused the family's relationships to deteriorate. The only daughter with whom Lloyd maintains a good relationship is his second daughter, Carrie. She stood out among her siblings because of her loyalty to he. He spent time with her, took her to the ballet and other events, and even did her hair and makeup. However, he did not show such affection to the rest of the family. As Carrie grew up, she became a very thoughtful person, actively involved in many charitable organizations, and enjoyed helping the homeless. despite some disagreements. But the Nurauder family stayed together until 2008. During this time, America faced a severe financial crisis, causing job and money problems for millions. Lloyd lost his job and had to look for a new one, but many others were in the same situation. Michelle also looked for jobs but couldn't find any. She had been managing household duties and caring for their daughters. Lloyd eventually found a decent job in New Jersey. Michelle was relieved that he found employment. He moved to New Jersey alone, while Michelle took a part-time job in their hometown, Corning, juggling it with childcare and housework. It was challenging for her, as she was supporting the family on her own. A few months later, things took a strange turn, when Lloyd suddenly demanded a divorce from Michelle. This decision was unexpected because there had been no serious signs of trouble in their marriage. Even their friends hadn't noticed any quarrels between them. Lloyd's decision was a complete shock to Michelle and children, leaving her feeling lost. She had been an excellent mother and wife, but her husband put her in a difficult position. He claimed that during their time apart, he has no more feelings and no longer wanted to be with her. Worse still, before proposing the divorce, he had that she cut off all ties with her family and friends. This further upset Michelle, as she felt isolated and lacking support. Despite experiencing a nervous breakdown, she managed to pull herself together. She found a job as an English teacher at a college and became a single mother. Several years after the divorce, Michelle and her children moved to another house in the same city. Her daughters had grown up, which made her life easier. The girls can help with housework and take care of themselves. This allowed Michelle to focus more on her work. She has built a successful career and made a lot of money. Even so, Lloyd, a manipulative person, still makes things difficult when fights over child support and arguing about alimony. The divorce process lasted about 5 years, during which Lloyd repeatedly attempted to discredit Michelle to gain custody. Despite this, Michelle fought back, she defending herself in court and made a rebuttal against Lloyd. Lloyd was a skilled manipulator, and after 2010, the middle daughter, Carrie, moved in with him. Little girl believed it was her own decision because she loved and missed her father. The other children did not agree with her choice and urged her to stay with their mother, Michelle. In court, the judge supported the decision of the other children to remain with Michelle. On August 28, 2017, a family friend arrived at Michelle's house to pick up her youngest daughter for swimming practice. As he got out of the car and approached the house, he noticed Michelle in an unusual position by the stairs, visible through the living room window. He knocked on the door, but no one answered, and Michelle didn't move. The dog was barking continuously, which made he feel uneasy. He found the door was unlocked. So he went inside to check. As he got closer, he realized that Michelle was not standing but was hanging from the railing. He checked her pulse, but her hand was cold and numb. He immediately called 911, reports that Michelle appears to have ended his life. When emergency services arrived, they confirmed that 46-year-old Michelle had been dead for some time and beyond repair. The police searched the house but found no one else present, even though Michelle lived there with her 14-year-old daughter. Carrie lived with Lloyd, and the eldest daughter was away at college. At first, it seemed like Michelle had committed his life. However, as the police investigated, they found more inconsistencies in the case. There were marks on Michelle's face, suggesting the incident may have been staged. It was also strange that the youngest daughter was nowhere to be seen, even though she was supposed to be home. This led the police to consider both murder and the possible kidnapping of the child. Detectives contacted Carrie and Lloyd. They first reached Carrie, and the little girl said that her youngest sister was there. This interested the police, as the younger daughter never missed training and did not want to go to her father's house, Lloyd. Michelle hadn't allowed her to miss school the day before, so why did she go there? The police then confirmed this with Carrie. Carrie explained she had stayed overnight at Michelle's. Carrie and her sister left Michelle's home long before a family friend discovered Michelle. According to little girl, Michelle had been unstable and hysterical during the day, so Carrie didn't want to leave her younger sister with her mother and took her with her. The story seemed implausible because Michelle's body was cold when discovered, indicating she had died long before. This contradicted Carrie's statement that they left shortly before a family friend found Michelle's. Contacting Michelle's acquaintances and friends also made Carrie's story more suspicious, as they provided a different perspective to the police. A friend mentioned that 2 days before her death, Michelle attended a court hearing about custody issues for her youngest daughter. Lloyd was actively fighting for custody, but he was unexpectedly absent from the last meeting and did not answer calls, which was very unlike him. Michelle was very happy because she would win custody of her youngest daughter. She even celebrated with her lawyer, confident she would be granted full custody due to Lloyd's absence. Therefore, she had no reason to be anxious or depressed, as the custody issue had been resolved in her favor. Michelle's mother, Jeannie, upon learning about the tragedy, immediately informed the police that she suspected Lloyd of being responsible for her death. She could not believe that Michelle would choose to end her own life and leave her children behind. Consequently, Lloyd became the prime suspect, because for years, he tried to take away Michelle's custody, and their divorce had been contentious. It was initially difficult to reach Lloyd. According to Carrie, he was with her at the time of the murder, help her settle into her new home before going to university. Lloyd spent the night at a hotel in Rochester, which is about 160 kilometers from Cortland, and then flew to California for a job interview, placing him 4,000 kilometers away. When investigators contacted Lloyd and informed him of Michelle's death, he showed no emotion. After the trial, Lloyd went to the police station and confirmed Carrie's claim that during the time of Michelle's death, he was in another city helping Carrie move. According to Lloyd, Carrie came to see him at the hotel to see how he was getting along. He then took little girl to the parking lot, and she left, and he returned to his room. He provided the hotel reservation as evidence. Although he agreed to take a polygraph test, he never did. Detectives couldn't file charges due to insufficient evidence, but they were suspicious The police began reviewing CCTV footage and phone records to track the movements of Lloyd and Carrie in the days leading up to Michelle's death. They found inconsistencies between the footage and the location of Lloyd's phone, suggesting he was deliberately leaving his phone behind to hide his movements. It became clear he was not truthful. Carrie was indeed with he at a Rochester hotel, but in the evening, they went to the parking lot, and he did not return to the room as he claimed. They went somewhere on the night of the murder and only returned at 7 a.m. the next day. Investigators found that Lloyd was in financial trouble. He has to bear large debts. He owed $100,000 on one credit card and was in desperate need of money. However, after the death of Michelle, he received over $200,000 from her life insurance, which was beneficial for him. This made investigators more suspicious of him, and they to scrutinize him more closely. When checking the location data from Carrie and Lloyd's cell phones, investigators found out that it seemed like Carrie was involved too. The decision was made to monitor the conversations between Carrie and Lloyd. Wiretaps of their phone calls revealed they were indeed hiding something. They avoided many topics during their discussions, and Lloyd often abruptly ended Carrie's questions, as if aware they were being monitored. Some conversations were deferred to face-to-face meetings. Lloyd repeatedly stressed the importance of keeping quiet during their calls, indicating they had secrets to conceal. The detectives were certain they were on the right track and expected Carrie and Lloyd to confess, but it didn't happen. So, the police decided to accelerate the investigation by speaking to Carrie directly. They invited her for questioning. However, she did not go to the police station, making various excuses. Through wiretapping, the police discovered that Lloyd was pressuring her to delay and forbade her from going to the station to avoid exposure. Meanwhile, a forensic expert performed an autopsy on Michelle and confirmed clear signs of murder. He found bruises around her eyes and marks on her chin. It appeared she was attacked from behind and strangled. The attacker held her by the throat, making it difficult for her to resist. It was evident that she hadn't committed to end his life, and the situation was clearly a setup. This forced them to contact Carrie again. However, she continued not to go to the police station. The detectives didn't want to hear her excuses anymore, so they met her right after school. She was caught off guard and confused at the police station. Initially, she denied everything. She admitted to being with Lloyd at Michelle's house that morning, but claimed she didn't know what happened there. Her parents started arguing, then they went upstairs and continued arguing. Under pressure from the detectives, Carrie revealed an even more terrifying than Lloyd's. Carrie confessed that Lloyd really killed Michelle, and she was there to ensure her sister didn't witness the crime. She was actually an accomplice to the murder. A week before the incident, she and Lloyd planned to make it look like Michelle had ended her life. The police listened to the candid confession of she. She admitted to hating her mother but couldn't explain why. She idolized her father, Lloyd. This is typical behavior of a manipulated person. Under Lloyd's influence, Carrie's hatred for Michelle grew, he manipulating her until the end. This manipulation led her to become an accomplice, agreeing to help him, covering for him, and help prove his alibi. The police arrested Carrie. Then, they went to Lloyd's house, but he wasn't there. Investigators tracked him down in Princeton using his phone. When officers arrived at the parking lot where he was located, Lloyd saw them and climbed onto a railing, threatening to jump from the 5th floor. After 2 hours of negotiations, the police were able to reach him, and he was arrested. He was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and tampering with evidence. He was shocked by the arrest and denied all charges. He claimed he was at a hotel during the crime. Phone records supported his alibi, and he had a room reservation at the time. However, CCTV footage showed him leaving the hotel with Carrie at night and returning during the day. GPS data placed him near Michelle's house at the time of the murder, and Michelle's pajamas had his DNA. This evidence dismantled his alibi. 19-year-old Carrie was charged with second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and concealment of evidence. She faced a potential life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. To avoid the maximum penalty, she admitted her guilt and agreed to cooperate with the prosecution. She was required to testify against her own father at the trial. During the trial, the prosecutor highlighted a troubling aspect of the case: Carrie was directly involved in the crime. She was present in Michelle's house and assisted Lloyd. Despite having multiple chances to stop the crime, she chose not to intervene and instead helped her father murder her mother. According to the evidence, Carrie and Lloyd arrived at Michelle's house early in the morning. She trusted them and opened the front door, unaware of the impending betrayal by they. Lloyd attacked Michelle and strangled her with a rope. While this happened, Carrie ensured that her younger sister remained asleep and did not witness the crime. After the murder, they left through the back door, preventing the younger sister from realizing what had occurred inside the house. The evidence collected by the detectives included nearly 26 files. Most pointed out that Lloyd had been turning Carrie against her mother, Michelle, for years. He consistently insulted Michelle and portrayed her negatively. Once Carrie moved in with him, he began to restrict her communication. His goal was to kill Michelle and other children. Consequently, she unintentionally developed hatred toward Michelle. The prosecution claimed that the motive for the murder was to claim life insurance money and avoid sharing custody of his youngest daughter. Lloyd believed that making Michelle's death look like she had ended her own life would allow them to live comfortably with the money. In court, Carrie testified that Lloyd gave her a harsh ultimatum: either they kill her mother, or he might end his own life. He complained about his difficult financial situation because he had to pay $6,000 in alimony every month, stating he couldn't continue living this way. Faced with this, Carrie made a dire choice and agreed to help in the crime against Michelle. The prosecutor acknowledged that Lloyd manipulated Carrie and advocated for lenient punishment for her. Ultimately, he admitted his guilt in the murder. As a result, Lloyd was found guilty of first-degree murder and other charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and is currently held at Clinton Correctional Facility in New York. During the trial, Carrie's maternal grandmother, Jeannie, requested a lighter sentence for Carrie and a harsher sentence for Lloyd, who had tormented Michelle throughout their 25-year marriage and ultimately killed her. Jeannie expressed that she did not believe Michelle would have wanted a severe prison sentence for Carrie, but rather for little girl to lead a happy life. Carrie was found guilty of concealing evidence. The judge considered Jeannie's plea and the prosecutor's perspective, resulting in the lightest possible sentence of 1 to 3 years in prison. Carrie was released early on January 16, 2020. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Chloe and Aubrey Berry. Wack-BJ is a small coastal settlement in Canada with a population of under 20,000 people. It is an ideal place for starting a family with a united, quiet, safe, but still well-developed community. On December 25, 2017, the town was alive with the Christmas spirit. The windows of the apartments along the street sparkled with colorful lights, and homes were beautifully decorated. However, the festive atmosphere was disrupted by the flashing lights of police cars responding to a tragic incident. Sarah worked for the local ferry service, which connected the mainland with coastal areas and several nearby islands for communication and cargo deliveries. She studied at the University of Victoria and completed an internship for this position. Prior to this, she worked in the public relations group. She was active and energetic in everything she pursued, which brought her success. Her relationship with Andrew blossomed quickly after they met, and they soon took their relationship to the next level. They got married and started a family, welcoming their daughter Chloe in 2013. 2 years later, they gave birth to their second daughter, Aubrey. At the beginning of their relationship, the love of young couple Sarah and Andrew seemed sincere and sweet. However, the pressures of daily life began to take a toll on their bond. After the family has children, their relationship deteriorated significantly. To make matters worse, Sarah faced the heartbreak of losing her father in a car accident. All of these things caused Andrew's behavior to change a lot. He became anxious, prone to outbursts over minor issues, and often directed verbal insults at Sarah. It was clear that Sarah's father had previously helped control Andrew's temper, but now that support was gone. As a consequence, Andrew's aggressiveness increased. Initially, Sarah attempted to resolve conflicts and kept their issues private, hoping this tough time would pass. Unfortunately, matters only worsened. During a tense argument over custody of her 2 daughters, Aubrey and Chloe, Andrew made serious threats, claiming that he would harm the entire family if the situation did not change. Sarah was deeply troubled by these threats, and Andrew's anger became increasingly uncontrollable. Andrew's behavior became erratic and dangerous. When he got angry, he drove recklessly, creating hazardous situations on the road. At first, he tried not to act like that when his daughter was there, but he eventually lost control and engaged in these antics even with the daughter in the car. It is clear that this marriage was once a happy one, but now it has become seriously dangerous for Sarah and her daughter, who were growing up in a hostile and unsafe environment. Despite this, Sarah made efforts to maintain the marriage. Months went by until Sarah reached her breaking point. She decided to end the relationship and told Andrew directly that he needed to move out that day. Instead of leaving calmly, Andrew has sparked another debate, barging into his wife's bedroom and trying to strangle her. Sarah managed to escape, grabbed her phone, and called the police. Andrew continued his aggressive behavior until the police arrived, clearly displaying his violent nature. He was quickly arrested and taken to the police station. After this episode, Sarah obtained a restraining order, preventing Andrew from approaching her or their children. This brought a sense of relief to the family, as Andrew was now under control. He moved into his own apartment and lived alone, while Sarah took care of their 2 daughters. She worked hard and often worked overtime to earn money to raise her children. Meanwhile, her mother also helps take care of the children while she is at work. During this time, Sarah and Andrew finalized their divorce, and Sarah was awarded full custody of their children. Because of his aggressive behavior, Andrew lost his visitation rights and was ordered to pay alimony. For 3 months, Sarah focused entirely on her daughters, giving them her love and attention. However, everything shifted when Andrew returned, saying he missed his daughters and wanted to meet with them. Sarah refused his request, and he was unable to see the children. At that point, Andrew seemed to have changed. With the help of a lawyer and witness testimonies, he wanted to protest the court's decision to grant custody of the child. Amendments were made to the court order, allowing him to see his daughters on weekends. He was proud that he now had official permission to meet with them. Sarah was responsible for bringing the girls Aubrey and Chloe to meet their father, Andrew, and she made sure to supervise their visits. During these times, Andrew was able to connect well with his daughters. Unfortunately, this was just the start of a tragedy. A few years later, issues arose concerning alimony and the shared ownership of the house. The court ordered Andrew to pay a large amount in alimony. Meanwhile, there were ongoing discussions about how to divide the jointly owned house for the benefit of their children. Andrew, the young father, refused to contribute any money towards the house. Consequently, the court allowed Sarah to buy Andrew's share of the property, valued at $60,000, for only $20,000, after deducting the alimony debt. The agreement means that Sarah will have full ownership of the house and will no longer be able to claim maintenance payments. Sarah accepted these terms. However, Andrew opposed this arrangement and sought to contest the court's decision. During this time, he frequently took their daughters to spend time, as the court permitted him to do so without the presence of their mother or any guardianship authorities. Soon, Sarah began to notice increasingly concerning signs regarding her children. After Andrew returning them one day, she discovered a bruise-like mark on Aubrey's head. When she called Andrew, he explained that Aubrey had accidentally hit herself while playing. However, during a later conversation, Aubrey revealed that Andrew had attempted to touch her inappropriately. Andrew dismissed the accusation as absurd, but Sarah believed her daughter. Determined to protect her children, she contacted Child Protection Services. An investigation was launched, and during this time, Andrew's interactions with Chloe and Aubrey were closely monitored. Although Sarah and Aubrey expressed concerns, law enforcement and Child Protection Services found no evidence of any misconduct by Andrew, leading them to close the case. Andrew insisted that Aubrey's bruise was caused by her falling, which appeared plausible since he stated he had accidentally bumped into her during a game. Sarah argued that Andrew posed a danger to their daughters, Aubrey and Chloe. She noted that he had previously exhibited strange and suspicious behavior, and the daughters were often reluctant to spend time with him. In an effort to protect her children, Sarah attempted to restrict Andrew's visits. In late 2016, she once again questioned his ability to care for them after he left Aubrey alone in a stroller in a public area while he walked away. Furthermore, Sarah claimed that Andrew spoke badly about her in front of the children, which she thought was his way of trying to turn them against her. During the trial, Sarah and Andrew shared their accounts of the incident and presented their arguments. Ultimately, the situation remained unchanged. Aubrey va Chloe continued to live with Sarah, while Andrew was allowed to take them on holidays and weekends. The judge viewed Andrew as a caring father capable who could provide well for his daughters. The court concluded that Andrew's aggressive behavior was only temporary and linked to domestic issues, with no evidence of child abuse presented. Andrew was given another chance, and both he and Sarah received decisions that they must comply with so they can continue to communicate with 6-year-old daughter Chloe and 4-year-old daughter Aubrey. Chloe and Aubrey were bright, cheerful children with distinct personalities and interests. Chloe had just begun first grade at a local school, where she discovered her passion for horse riding, a skill her cousin had been teaching her since she was young. She also had a talent for art. Meanwhile, Aubrey was getting ready to start school. The sisters were full of energy and creativity, and they shared a close bond and a love for artistic activities. During the court hearings, the guardianship service assessed Sarah, the girl's mother, and found her to be an excellent parent. She worked hard to maintain a good relationship with her daughters, both during their time as a family and after the divorce. The judge required both Sarah and Andrew to complete special training courses, and Andrew was actively involved in the process. Unfortunately, this wasn't enough to prevent a tragic outcome. According to the custody agreement, Aubrey va Chloe were scheduled to spend Christmas 2017 with their father, Andrew. They celebrated Sarah's birthday on December 21st at morning with the children, and then Sarah took Chloe and Aubrey to Andrew's apartment on Beach Drive. Andrew lived just steps from the marina, in an upscale part of the city with a view of the Pacific coast. However, he is facing many great difficulties, including a financial crisis. He had quit his job, lost his main source of income, and developed a gambling addiction. As a result, he was unable to pay alimony or even provide basic necessities for himself and the children. From the beginning, Sarah believed it was a mistake to take Aubrey and Chloe to see Andrew. A court order obligated her to do so, and failing to comply could lead to serious repercussions for her. Sarah was especially hesitant to let Aubrey and Chloe spend the Christmas holidays with him, as she felt it was unfair, but she felt she had no alternative. Sarah asked Andrew to leave the children with her for her birthday, but he immediately threatened to sue, so she was forced to comply. As Sarah approached Andrew's apartment, her anxiety intensified. She noticed from a distance that the lights in the windows were off. For several weeks, Aubrey va Chloe had shared that during their visits with Andrew, they enjoyed using flashlights as if they were camping, which they found entertaining. Sarah was aware that Andrew had left his job in May and are having a lot of financial difficulties, which might explain why the electricity had been cut off. To avoid making the situation more tense and affect the children's vacation, she decided not to talk about the issue with Andrew and the children right away. However, she planned to address it later, as she was looking for ways to restrict Andrew meet to Aubrey va Chloe. When saying goodbye to Aubrey va Chloe, Sarah was understood that they would stay with Andrew until noon on December 25th, after which he was expected to return them. Upon returning home, Sarah noticed that Chloe had forgotten her favorite stuffed toy. She took the toy and brought it to Chloe. When she knocked on the window of Andrew's apartment, both Aubrey va Chloe appeared at the blinds in their holiday outfits, smiling and looking happy. This made Sarah feel a bit more at ease. She gave the daughters the toy and left, anticipating that she would see them again in a few days. On Christmas morning, Sarah woke up in a surprisingly quiet house and began her usual chores to pass the time until Aubrey va Chloe returned. During this time, she cleaned the house, decorated for the holiday, and placed presents under the tree, all in an effort to make the daughters happy. By 2 p.m., Sarah's parents arrived, but she was starting to worry because Aubrey va Chloe had not yet returned from Andrew's house. Andrew was supposed to return Aubrey and Chloe by noon, but Sarah had called and texted him several times without getting a response. She then tried to contact Andrew's sister, but she also ignored Sarah's calls and messages. Growing more worried, Sarah decided to go look for the children with her mother, leaving her father at home in case Andrew arrived with the daughters. When Sarah and her mother arrived at Andrew's apartment, Aubrey and Chloe were no longer at the window. Inside, the place felt eerily quiet and empty. Sarah couldn't see what was happening through the blinds. She knocked and shouted at the window, but there was no response, which only increased her fear. In desperation, they decided to speak with the neighbors. One neighbor mentioned that he had heard the children talking early in the morning and, closer to midday, he heard loud noises coming from the apartment. Initially, he thought nothing of it, but now it seemed suspicious. He also noted that he hadn't seen any strangers near the building. Alarmed, Sarah and her mother quickly contacted the police to report Aubrey and Chloe's disappearance. When the first police officer arrived at the scene, he attempted to contact Andrew, the apartment's owner, but received no answer, just as no one responded to Sarah's screams. The officer then tried to open the door and discovered it was not locked. Inside, the lights were off, and flipping the switch had no effect. It became clear that Andrew's electricity and water had been cut off due to unpaid utility bills, and he was facing eviction. Using a flashlight, the officer was met with a shocking sight that resembled a horror movie scene. Blood was splattered everywhere, including the ceiling, prompting him to immediately call for backup. The police officers cautiously, weapons drawn, aware that the killer responsible for the horrific massacre might still be inside. They followed a bloody footprint to the bathroom, where they discovered Andrew, who was naked and severely injured with multiple wounds to his chest. He was still breathing, but each breath seemed increasingly difficult. In the next room, they found Chloe on the bed. She was already dead. Her body showed numerous cuts and bruises, indicating she had been beaten with a blunt object. Nearby, a bloody baseball bat lay on the floor among her clothes. Aubrey was found in a similar state as Chloe, dressed in blood-soaked pajamas, with splatters even on the ceiling. Both children, Aubrey and Chloe, had suffered multiple lacerations and stab wounds, similar to those found on their father, Andrew. The police checked Aubrey and Chloe's pulses several times, but they were confirmed dead. An ambulance quickly arrived to assist Andrew. Due to the cramped space in the bathroom, he was placed on a stretcher and prepared to be carried out of the apartment. At that moment, he regained consciousness, looked at the medics, and simply asked them to end his life. Andrew was taken to hospital with other police officers, and they hoped to question him once his health has stabilized. Meanwhile, they informed Sarah that both of her daughters, Aubrey and Chloe, were dead. Overcome with grief, she screamed hysterically and desperately tried to enter the apartment. Sarah had many questions, and so did the investigators, about the brutal murders of her two young children on Christmas Day. She believed she knew the answer: their father had killed them. Given the severity of the injuries, Andrew quickly became the primary suspect. Sarah warned that he was a danger to himself and Aubrey and Chloe due to the nature of the wounds. The police thought he might be more willing to talk while in the hospital, as they often obtained truthful confessions in such situations. Therefore, they wanted to interview Andrew to uncover what had happened to the children and to him. The police suspected Andrew had harmed Aubrey and Chloe, defenseless children, and after realizing the gravity of his actions, he might have attempted to take his life. Aubrey and Chloe's bodies were so severely damaged that the expert believed he first killed Chloe, then he killed Aubrey. Chloe suffered multiple severe head injuries from a baseball bat, which led to a fractured skull. Additionally, she had 26 stab wounds. Some of her wounds were inflicted before her death, while others occurred posthumously. The cause of death was identified as blood loss. Aubrey's situation was tragically severe. She had 32 stab wounds. leading to fatal blood loss. The medical examiner determined that the attacker had flipped the children over twice to stab them in both the front and back. He appeared to be enraged and intended to ensure that the girls would not survive Christmas. Meanwhile, forensic investigators thoroughly examined the apartment and discovered men's jeans and a blood-soaked t-shirt, both belonging to Andrew. A knife, clearly the murder weapon, was also located at the scene. The amount of blood in the apartment was so much that a team of experts was called in to assist in the investigation. Experts discovered many signs that there were efforts to clean up the scene, including fingerprints on the knife and patterned socks. Blood traces were even found in the refrigerator, indicating that the perpetrator had rummaged through it after the attack. In one of the rooms, a note addressed to his sister was found. In this note, Andrew expressed a long list of disappointments about his difficulties with Sarah, and felt misunderstood by the woman he loved deeply. He conveyed a sense of betrayal and recounted the many struggles he faced during his marriage and after his divorce. According to his confession, the only source of happiness in his life was his children, which led him to decide to end their lives together. It was clearly a suicide note. After investigating the crime scene, the police concluded that Andrew had attacked and brutally killed his children, Aubrey, 4 years old, and Chloe, 6 years old. Following the incident, he entered the bathroom and attempted to harm himself, believing these injuries would also result in his death. However, doctors assessed that none of his self-inflicted wounds were life-threatening, so he survived. Andrew soon regained his composure and was placed under medical supervision, where he admitted to self-harm. After receiving treatment, he was arrested and charged with double murder. When Andrew was taken to the police station, Sarah was already there with her parents. The police believed that Andrew had harmed the children, and he confessed to his actions, which caused Sarah to burst into tears. She had to be taken away from the station because she was inconsolable. It is hard to imagine her despair and grief, especially since she had tried desperately to protect her daughters from their father. Despite filing complaints with Child Protection Services and taking legal action, Sarah could not provide evidence to prove that Andrew was a danger, and her claims were not believed. Tragically, her daughters were killed by their father. The case received widespread attention and many people held memorial services to honor Aubrey and Chloe, innocent girls who suffered. The public was outraged by Andrew's actions and expressed support for Sarah. This incident sparked a worldwide reevaluation of the child protection system and raised questions about the judge who deemed Andrew a father thoughtful and loving to his children. The judge's decision granted Andrew unsupervised access to Aubrey and Chloe, which ultimately resulted in their deaths. However, no disciplinary actions were taken against the judge or the Child Protection Service. The victims of the tragic massacre, Aubrey and Chloe, were cremated. During the investigation, the complicated relationship between Andrew and Sarah came to light. Andrew is having a lot of trouble with his finances. He left his job in May 2017 and had already begun having trouble keeping up with his rent and utility bills, leading to his electricity being cut off. His financial problems were largely fueled by his gambling addiction. Although Andrew earned a decent wage of around $200 per shift, but during this time, he became addicted to playing cards. He attempted to recover his losses, but things only worsened. He started borrowing money from anyone who would lend it to him. His gambling addiction spiraled out of control, with his gambling expenses reaching about $3,000 each month. In the fall of 2015, Andrew won a big amount of $100,000, but feeling overconfident, he quickly lost it all. In an attempt to win back his losses, he borrowed $10,000 from a man named Paul. Desperate to repay this loan, he continued to take out additional loans, while losing interest in his job, eventually quitting. By spring 2017, he was in deep financial trouble, owing approximately $225,000, with all his credit limits maxed out. Andrew was in a desperate situation, even thinking about withdrawing his savings from a pension fund. He couldn't afford to buy food and had to ask his neighbors for help to feed his daughters during their visit. His life was filled with ongoing tragedy. During the investigation, police found disturbing search queries in his internet history. About a month before the double murder, he had been searching for ways to end his own life. His problems grew worse, and on Christmas Day, he made a tragic decision. He used a brutal method to kill his daughters, doing this act coldly and mercilessly, which makes people doubt his love for them. On January 16th, the hearings for the double murder case began. The prosecutor presented detailed information to the jury about Andrew's relationship and life circumstances just before the crime occurred. The prosecution argued that Andrew willingly put himself in this situation because he could not overcome his gambling addiction. They described his actions as premeditated, using evidence like his internet browsing history to support their argument. In contrast, the defense attorney highlighted flaws in the investigation, pointing out that a patrolman had left the scene while waiting for backup, which left the situation inside unclear. The lawyer argued that Andrew and his children were victims of a killer seeking revenge for Andrew's debts after the officer had left the scene. This allowed the real perpetrator to escape through the fire exit. However, the prosecution rejected these things because the scene was under constant surveillance. There were no signs of a break-in, and the attacker could not have quietly exited the scene without being seen by the police officer. Furthermore, statement of the defense contradicted Andrew's confession made at the hospital. During his hospital stay, he even asked the medical staff to help him die, indicating that he had inflicted injuries on himself and wanted to end his life. It is clear from Andrew's suicide note that he intended to end his life and harm the daughters so that they would be with him in death. However, the lawyer maintained that the family could have been victims of a stranger, a killer who unexpectedly found Andrew and the children in the apartment. Alternatively, they could have all been random victims of a maniac. On April 25, 2017, a woman was attacked and stabbed near Andrew's house, but the police could not identify her attacker. The defense suggested that the same person could be responsible for both this attack and the murder of Andrew's children, who remains at large. However, the details of the wounds and the circumstances of each incident were different, indicating Andrew's guilt. During the presentation of the crime scene and evidence related to the murders of Aubrey and Chloe, Andrew started to cry. The prosecutor asserted that their father, Andrew, was responsible for the murders. One key piece of evidence was blood on the floor that matched Andrew's. If the attacker had been a stranger, they would probably have worn shoes typically found in a home. However, the shoes Andrew was wearing when he was arrested matched those discovered at the crime scene. Also, the forensic expert pointed out that the injuries on Andrew and the daughters were the same. Andrew acknowledged that he had inflicted wounds on himself, and similar cuts were found on the children, indicating that the same person used the same weapon. At trial, the defense attorney argued that Sarah had put pressure on Andrew, leading to the possibility of him acting aggressively. They believe Sarah is the main cause of Andrew's unstable mental health. In response, Sarah countered these claims, saying that Andrew had been aggressive for a long time, which led to their divorce. She was only trying to protect her children from a dangerous and unpredictable situation, which is why she filed complaints with various authorities, all of which were ignored. Sarah was concerned about the safety of her daughters during visits. Recently, Andrew appeared to have changed for the better, but no one realized this was just his cover. The defense continued to argue for Andrew's innocence, portraying him as a victim of his circumstances. They mentioned that Andrew owed $200,000 to another man. Andrew claimed he couldn't pay his debts, which led to him being forced to keep a suspicious bag in his apartment, the contents of which he was unaware of. Various individuals resembling criminals would periodically come to collect it, and Andrew had given them a spare key. According to the lawyers, one of these individuals committed a violent act in the apartment. The prosecution questioned Andrew about why the attacker would kill Aubrey and Chloe in his apartment while he was there. Andrew claimed that he lost consciousness after being struck, and when he regained it, he found Aubrey va Chloe unresponsive. The attacker was still in the apartment, but due to the darkness, Andrew couldn't see his face clearly. However, he noted that the assailant was a dark-skinned man with dark hair. The attacker then ran into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and tug of war, during which Andrew was struck multiple times and lost consciousness again. A mysterious bag was discovered during the investigation, but no evidence of any intruder was found, including DNA or fingerprints. The prosecution argued that Andrew's primary motive for the murders was financial distress. He was struggling to cope with life, unable to pay his debts or child support, leading him to consider killing his children to escape these obligations. The jury deliberated for 3 days and ultimately found Andrew guilty of double second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole in 22 years. Andrew showed no emotion when the verdict was announced, shocking Sarah's family because the sentence was too light. They also found themselves unable to contest the verdict. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jane Hilton. Jane was a familiar face in El Dorado Hills, California. She wrote for the Foothill Times and often reported on local social events. Jane had 6 children, whom she loved dearly and often inspired through her daily poetry. After earning her real estate license, she married Archie Hilton in 1984, but the marriage fell apart in July 1985. Seeking help, Jane approached her former boss, Will McLean, who owned a large house in El Dorado Hills. Will's daughter, Maureen Klein, lived there with her boyfriend. Will's nephew, Ricky Davis, and his girlfriend, Connie Dahl, were also staying in another room in the house. On July 6, 1985, Will invited Jane and his youngest daughter, Autumn Anchor, to live in his house. Will's house was crowded and had a lot of people coming and going. However, Jane and Autumn's first night there would be their last. At 3:30 a.m., Ricky Davis, 20, and his girlfriend Connie Dahl, 19, returned from a party and found Autumn wandering around outside. Autumn said she had been attacked and feared her mother would be angry. The 3 of them then went inside, where they found traces of blood in the hallway. When they entered the first room, which belonged to Ricky's mother, Maureen, the air became quiet. On the bed, they found the bloody body of Jane Hilton. She had stopped breathing. Because Maureen and her boyfriend were away on a camping trip and were not home at the time, Ricky and Connie called 911. Paramedics and police arrived at the scene, but Jane was pronounced dead at the scene. She had been stabbed 29 times, beaten, and bitten on the shoulder. This senseless murder led investigators to begin questioning those closest to Jane. Archie Hilton, Jane's estranged husband, was at the top of the list of suspects. He was interviewed and provided a solid alibi, including DNA. Initially, Archie Hilton was the logical choice because their marriage was in trouble. However, he said that although they were having some difficulties, there was no sign that he and Jane were going to divorce. When Ricky Davis and Connie Dahl were interviewed, they both said that they came home early in the morning and found Autumn waiting outside. When they entered the house, they found the hallway carpet soaked in blood. The blood trail led them to the master bedroom, where they found Jane lying dead on the bloody mattress. The details and physical evidence in the case were scant, and the potential suspects all had alibis. The case gradually went cold. The cold case was reopened in 1999, and El Dorado County Sheriff's Department detectives Richard Strasser and Rick Fitzgerald were assigned to investigate. After a thorough review of the case file, they focused on a newspaper article about Connie Dahl, Ricky Davis's ex-girlfriend and Jane Hilton's roommate. In the article, Connie described the position of Jane's body when she was found, lying on the bed, as if someone had placed her in her usual sleeping position. However, this testimony contradicted Ricky Davis's earlier statement. Ricky had said on the recording that the body was found on the floor. But at the time, detectives thought they heard Ricky say that, but they weren't sure. Detectives questioned Connie for 3 hours. At first, she stuck to her story. But over the next 18 months, Connie was questioned 4 times. Each time, the detectives used techniques known to increase the likelihood of a false confession. They accused Connie of her role in the murder, and she was threatened with being charged with murder. As a result, Connie cooperated with the detectives, even though she had no actual role in the case. She was convicted of manslaughter and only served 1 year in prison. Detective Strasser and Fitzgerald lied to Connie, telling her that they would use DNA evidence to identify a suspect. In fact, no DNA evidence was collected or tested in this case. Instead, the investigators used crime scene photos and real events, such as the bite mark on Jane's shoulder, to provide information to Connie and guide her to recall events the way they wanted. Over the course of 4 interviews, Connie began to lose control and recall events from the case. However, this also allowed her to create a completely different story about the night of the murder, based on what she remembered and what investigators gave her. Connie Dahl gave conflicting accounts of Jane Hilton's murder. In one interview, she claimed that Autumn Anchor was present at the crime scene and was shot. In another interview, she admitted that she may have bitten Jane's shoulder. Connie also claimed that the murder began with an argument between Ricky Davis and Jane, which stemmed from Ricky's desire for Autumn to join them at a party, which Jane refused. Despite changing her story to fit the facts, Connie could not recall the murder weapon or where it was hidden. However, she implicated her ex-boyfriend Ricky Davis in the case, making him the prime suspect. Following Connie's confession, detectives interviewed Ricky Davis and Autumn Anchor. Both stuck to their original accounts of the case. The detectives attempted to deceive Ricky by telling him that Autumn had also implicated him in the murder, but he did not change his story. Autumn told the detectives that she had no reason to protect Ricky and would not be swayed by threats of charges. Despite using coercive interrogation techniques, the detectives were unable to get Ricky or Autumn to change their statements. Therefore, they used Connie's confession to arrest Ricky. Connie accepted a plea bargain, agreeing to testify against Ricky in exchange for a reduced sentence. At Ricky's first trial, the jury was unable to reach a verdict, leading to a retrial. However, at his second trial in 2005, the jury found him guilty. During the trial, Connie took the stand and testified against Ricky. She explained that she had wrestled with Jane and accidentally bit her shoulder. Connie then walked out, leaving Ricky alone with Jane. Once outside, she heard Jane screaming, pleading, and gagging as Ricky continued to assault her. Ricky was sentenced to 16 years in prison for second-degree murder, largely based on Connie's testimony. Connie, on the other hand, received a reduced sentence of manslaughter and a 1-year sentence in county jail. Unfortunately, she died of a drug overdose in 2014. Despite his conviction, Ricky maintained his innocence. In 2006, he contacted the Northern California Innocence Project, NCIP, for help in proving his innocence. NCIP, a nonprofit founded in 2001 by Kathleen Rodolphi and Linda Starr, provides DNA testing services to convicted prisoners who claim innocence. Ricky's case was reopened in 2006 after he contacted NCIP. NCIP and the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office worked together to retest DNA from the crime scene. The retesting included Hilton's nightgown and biological material found under her fingernails. The retesting uncovered a DNA profile from an unidentified male. This DNA was found on both Hilton's fingernails and nightgown, indicating that they came from the same source. The results cleared Ricky, Connie, and anchor of any crimes. This also proved that Connie's testimony was false. The DNA test results also proved Archie Hilton innocent, but unfortunately, he had passed away by the time the results were released. The unidentified DNA profile was entered into the FBI's CODIS database, but no matches were found. While the new evidence supports Ricky's claim of innocence, there are still obstacles to overcome. NCIP successfully argued that if the DNA test results had been presented at Ricky's trial, the outcome might have been different. In California, the standard for overturning a conviction typically requires new evidence that clearly establishes innocence. This standard is extremely difficult to meet. An expert on false confessions, Richard Leo, reviewed the transcript of Connie Dahl's interview in 2015. He found that detectives used pressure techniques to force Connie to give a false confession that fit the detectives' preconceived ideas about Jane Hilton's murder. Then, in 2016, the Northern California Innocence Project, NCIP, helped sponsor Senate Bill 1134, which was intended to address these issues. The bill allows wrongfully convicted people like Ricky to prove that new evidence could convince a jury. It was passed in January 2017, after NCIP attorney Melissa O'Connell filed a motion for a new trial based on new DNA evidence. The bill was sponsored by former California State Senator Mark Leno and brings California standards in line with those of 43 other states. In 2019, Superior Court Judge Kenneth Malakian overturned Ricky's 2005 conviction and ordered a new trial. It was originally scheduled to begin in the fall of 2019, but due to the health of his defense attorney, the judge announced the trial would take place in April 2020. However, the trial date changed again. Advances in DNA testing helped Ricky become the first person in California and only the second person in the United States to be exonerated of a crime. A new DNA testing method called genetic genealogy helped achieve this result. Genetic genealogy is a new DNA testing method that involves taking DNA evidence from the crime scene and sending it to genetic companies. These companies then search genealogical databases to find a potential match. In February 2020, the DNA evidence matched a man. In February 2020, El Dorado County District Attorney Vern Pearson announced that a new suspect had been identified in the death of Jane Hilton. The man was identified through DNA evidence collected from the crime scene. Following his arrest, several residents who knew the man revealed his identity to the media. The man is known as Michael Green, a longtime resident of Roseville, California. Michael graduated from Oakmont High School in 1986. According to those who knew him, Michael was a nice and easygoing person. They even described him as very calm and cool. So, a former friend of Michael could not understand why he would commit such a brutal act in El Dorado Hills. Michael was 17 years old at the time of the crime. On the night of July 6, 1985, Jane Hilton's daughter Autumn met Michael and his two friends, Calvin and Stephen, at a park. Autumn then decided to go home to shower and said she would come back to see her friends. However, she went to another friend's house instead of going back to the park. However, that evening, Autumn returned to the park to meet the boys again. What happened next is only speculation. Investigators believe Michael took advantage of the moment to break into Jane's home and was discovered by her. In the struggle to escape, Michael may have attacked Jane in a frenzy. After the attack, Jane's body was discovered by Ricky, Connie, and Autumn when they returned home. Michael had no criminal record before or after the murder. Michael appeared to have lived a normal life until DNA linked him to the gruesome crime. Two other boys who were with Michael were sought shortly after his arrest. One boy, Calvin, had died some time ago. However, another boy, Stephen, was found and questioned the day after the arrest. Stephen is considered a witness, not a participant in the case. Michael was arrested on February 11, 2020. As Michael was a juvenile at the time of the murder, he made his first appearance in juvenile court on February 19, 2020. Michael was then transferred so that he could be tried as an adult. Michael waited 2.5 years before he was tried in court. On July 29, 2022, Michael pleaded no contest. This means that Michael waived his right to a jury trial, and he will face a charge of first-degree murder. He also waived his opportunity to object to the plea. His sentencing date was set for September 27, 2022, with Judge Suzanne Kingsbury presiding. During the sentencing hearing, Dr. Elizabeth Kaufman, a professor of educational psychology, was called to testify about adolescent development. Kaufman's research shows that adolescents have a variety of developmental needs, including emotional and cognitive development. In late adolescence, young people can distinguish between right and wrong, but their ability to control their emotions declines. To provide additional information, the defense called several witnesses from Michael's childhood who had maintained relationships with him into adulthood. When asked about their views of Michael after learning of his confession, all agreed that they were shocked he had committed the murder of Jane Hilton. Those who knew Michael described him as cheerful, well-liked, funny, and lovable, both before and after the murder. Michael's ex-wife, Karen Green, said, "Mike was not evil at all." After the witnesses finished testifying, each of Jane Hilton's children gave victim impact statements. All described the unforgivable loss Michael had caused their family. Heather Purvis McConnell, Jane Hilton's daughter, said, "The pain that will never go away will always haunt me." Ardith Brandon, Hilton's fourth child, said, "I loved my mother and I think Michael loved her too. I want to know how he would feel or what he would say to the person who stabbed your mother 29 times. What would you do if you got a call in the early morning to tell you your mother was dead?" Ardith recounted collecting her mother's belongings from the house where she was killed and ended with a powerful statement, "We will always have something in common, regret for the stupid decision you made 37 years ago." Hilton's son, Ian, echoed his sister's sentiments. He went on to explain the hardships the family faced and the constant nightmares they endured, especially after being wrongly blamed for her sister Autumn. As he finished, he broke down in tears and said, "All the words we say will never bring my mother back." Autumn was the last to speak. Her testimony showed real pain as she recounted what she had been through over the past 2 decades. She recounted the day 2 detectives came to her home, telling her they had found the people responsible for her mother's death. She was later accused of biting her mother and helping move her body from the floor to the bed. Autumn said that if she had not sought the help of a lawyer at the time, she doesn't know how far the investigators' intimidation tactics could have gone. Deputy District Attorney Jay Linden read a statement on behalf of the family. In the statement, he questioned Michael about why he killed Jane in such a brutal manner. "You hit her. She had multiple injuries around her head and face. You kicked her in the jaw. You bit her shoulder. Why did you do that?" Linden went on to read a statement expressing that Michael did not just kill Jane, he destroyed many lives in the process. Linden then asked Michael if he thought about Jane and who she was. He pointed out her accomplishments and the love she had for each of her children. In her closing argument, Michael's defense attorney, Margaret Husher, emphasized that Michael was not in control of his actions. Margaret argued that Michael did not realize that his actions were wrong because he was a teenager at the time. This argument was based on expert testimony from Dr. Kaufman. She asked the court to consider a reduced sentence, reading various criminal codes and court rules. However, Judge Kingsbury interjected and stated that the court would not consider granting Michael probation, leaving the defense unable to add any further comment. In response, Linden thanked the court and said that the request for probation was an insult. He said it was like a slap in the face to the victim's family, who had suffered for decades. Lyndon stated that Michael had gotten away with murder for 37 years and that granting him probation would allow him to get away with more. Judge Kingsbury has heard many arguments about juvenile murder cases. In her 26 years as a judge, she said the murder of Jane Hilton was the most brutal. Before sentencing, Kingsbury asked the victim's family to forgive them for the pain they have endured. She also hoped they would overcome their pain, as that was their mother's wish. Kingsbury encouraged Michael Green to use all the resources available to him in the California Department of Rehabilitation. She said Michael could achieve parole if he used those resources. Kingsbury also said Michael had a great side and that he had a lot to offer. She also said he was young enough to be released and live a productive life. Michael Green was sentenced to life in prison and is being held in the El Dorado County Jail. He will then be transferred to the California Department of Rehabilitation. Restitution will be determined after further review by the court. Ricky Davis, who was wrongfully convicted of the murder, was released on February 13, 2020. He will be entitled to more than $750,000 in state compensation. However, his attorney argues that this amount does not make up for the years of freedom he has lost. Ricky continues to sue the state for damages covering the period from May 21, 2002 to February 13, 2020, for a whopping $18 million. The lawsuit is still pending as of 2022. In September 2022, California passed Assembly Bill 2644, which prohibits law enforcement officers from using threats, physical harm, deception, or manipulative interrogation tactics when interrogating people 17 years of age or younger. District Attorney Vern Pearson is calling on all law enforcement agencies to stop using intimidation tactics. He says the deceptive tactics that have been used for years will assume guilt and focus on getting a confession instead of getting the whole story. The El Dorado County DA's office will now dismiss any case where the main evidence is a confession obtained through threats, lies, or psychologically manipulative interrogation tactics. The measures are intended to ensure that no one is convicted based on a false, coerced confession like the one that Ricky Davis made. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Mike Williams. Jerry Michael Williams was born on October 16, 1969, in Bradfordville, just north of Tallahassee. His parents worked as a bus driver and a kindergarten teacher. To those close to him, he was known as Mike. Despite financial struggles, which led to Mike and his older brother being raised in a trailer, but their childhood was filled with happiness. Furthermore, Mike's parents prioritized their son's education, setting aside money for their future instead of building a new home. Both boys attended North Florida Christian High School, where Mike excelled academically and socially. He served as student council president, played soccer, and actively participated in the Key Club. At 15, Mike developed a passion for duck hunting and met Denise Merrill, a cheerleader and council secretary. They began dating and formed a close bond. Their friends viewed Mike and Denise as a well-suited couple. During high school, Denise introduced Mike to Brian Winchester, and they became inseparable friends. Brian later befriended Kathy Thomas, and the two couples remained lifelong friends. After graduating from high school, Mike attended Florida State University, where he studied political science and urban planning. Denise and Mike graduated together, with Denise becoming a public accountant and Mike pursuing a career as a real estate appraiser. Mike was a hardworking individual who consistently put in 15-hour days, which ultimately led to his rapid career advancement. His personal life also flourished, as he married Denise in 1994. Around the same time, his friend Brian married Kathy. The two couples remained close friends. Mike was deeply devoted to his wife and worked tirelessly to provide for their family, exhibiting remarkable enthusiasm and dedication. At 31, Mike Williams was thriving as a real estate appraiser, earning nearly $200,000 annually. He and his wife lived in a small upscale neighborhood on the east side of town and welcomed a daughter, Ensley, in 1999. Despite engaging in risky activities, but he was always cautious and wanted to ensure that his family would be well provided for in the event of an emergency. He turned to his best friend, Brian, an insurance agent, to purchase 2 insurance policies, one for $250,000 and another for $500,000. After his father's sudden death in 2000, Mike felt a strong need to secure his family's financial future, so he turned to a friend for help again. Brian assisted him in obtaining a life insurance policy with a value of $1 million. 6 months before Mike disappeared, he bought life insurance worth nearly $2 million. On December 16, 2000, Mike woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a large reservoir connected to the Apalachicola River. It was Mike's 6th wedding anniversary, and he planned to celebrate with his wife Denise that night. However, when Denise and their daughter waited for Mike to return home at noon, he failed to show up. Denise became concerned and called her father. Her father then contacted Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Brian and his father went to Lake Seminole, where they found Mike's Ford Bronco parked near the boat dock, but there was no sign of Mike. They searched the areas where Mike liked to hunt but couldn't find him or his boat. They decided to contact the police. Investigators from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency were called in, and a search for Mike began. Later, a helicopter pilot spotted the boat drifting 225 feet from the boat ramp. When the boat was searched, Mike's shotgun was found, still in its case, shows that he has not used it. The search operation shifted from rescue to recovery. Locals believe the area was once an orchard before the 3 rivers were dammed to create the lake. The lake was nicknamed Stump Field due to the numerous remaining tree stumps above and below the waterline, which posed a hazard to motorized boats. Searchers hypothesized that Mike's boat struck a stump, causing him to fall into the water. His boots, filled with water, may have weighed him down, leading to his possible drowning. Additional agencies, including a dive team from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, joined the search. Despite a thorough search, but no signs of Mike were found. As the days passed, the operation transitioned from rescue to a body recovery mission. Search teams used probe poles to scour the lake's bottom, and service dogs were brought in to assist. 10 days after, a hunting hat with a camouflage pattern was found, but there was no evidence connecting it to Mike. Officials from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency speculated that Mike might have been consumed by alligators, which were abundant in the lake. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement found no evidence of foul play, reinforcing the theory that the incident was accidental. After a 5-week search, the effort to find Mike was halted. The following day, Denise organized a memorial service for her husband. Although Denise seemed to have accepted Mike's departure, his mother still found it difficult to accept. 6 months later, in June 2001, a fisherman discovered a pair of boots floating in the lake. A dive team searched the area and found a hunting jacket and a working flashlight on the lake floor. Inside the jacket pocket was Mike's hunting license, complete with his name and signature. The discovery raised several questions. Notably, neither the jacket nor the boots showed signs of an alligator attack, such as teeth marks. Additionally, none of the items appeared to have been in the water for 6 months, as the boots were not slimy. A week after the discovery, Denise's lawyer petitioned the court to declare Mike dead, citing the found items as evidence. The lawyers suggested that aquatic life, including alligators, might have consumed Mike's body entirely. The court approved this, and a death certificate was issued, stating that Mike died on December 16, 2000, due to accidental drowning while duck hunting on Lake Seminole. Mike's body was never recovered. Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, continues to search for her son, although this causes tension in her relationship with Denise. Denise demanded Cheryl stop searching and accept reality, threatening that if she continued, she would never see her granddaughter again. Cheryl refused to give up. She was determined to find Mike. Her perseverance ultimately led to the reopening of the investigation into Mike's disappearance. It took Cheryl 3 years of tireless efforts, including making phone calls, putting up signs, writing to the governor of Florida, compiling evidence, and contacting reporters, to convince law enforcement officials to open an investigation into Mike's disappearance. Cheryl later revealed that her contacted Matthew Oresco, an expert on alligators. Oresco explained that alligators do not eat during the cold winter months due to low water temperatures, and their main priority is maintaining body heat. Temperatures as low as 14 degrees make alligators uninterested in food. Additionally, according to Oresco, alligator attacks always leave behind forensic evidence. 3 years later, Cheryl convinced law enforcement to dismiss the alligator theory and start a formal investigation into her son's disappearance. New discoveries regarding the behavior of alligators prompted a re-examination of the case. Evidence from interviews and data suggested that Mike's death was not an accident. Former investigator Ronnie Austin stated, "My instinct tells me Mike did not die in Lake Seoul, and that's what most law enforcement agencies working on this case agree on." Austin worked on Mike's case at the 2nd District State's Attorney's Office. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency initially handled the case as a missing hunter incident. They dedicated 735 hours to searching a 10-acre area of the lake for Mike's body, but surprisingly they did not find any signs of crime. Years later, those involved in the search, including police officer David Arnett, who was present at the scene, expressed that several things seemed unusual from the start. Firstly, it was unusual for Mike to hunt alone. Additionally, his truck was found in an undeveloped area, which would have required him to drag the boat through mud, rather than using the nearby concrete boat launch that he typically used. The severe storm that night should have pushed the boat towards the east shore, but it was instead found on the west shore. Additionally, the boat's motor was not running, yet it was still full of gasoline. If Mike had been operating the boat and fallen out, the boat would have continued to float in circles until it ran out of fuel. Law enforcement initially believed Mike's death was a simple drowning, but they later began to suspect foul play. However, by that time, the crime scene had already been trampled by numerous volunteers and searchers. A vital piece of evidence, a vehicle, was taken by Mike's family without being inspected by investigators. Additionally, some potential witnesses were overlooked. Denise and Brian were identified as suspects when investigators found out that Brian had just gone through a divorce from his previous wife, Kathy, and then quickly married Denise. Furthermore, Denise had received nearly $2 million from Mike's life insurance policy. Detectives also found it suspicious that Brian had sold Mike the policy. The investigation raised more red flags when Denise, Mike's wife, showed no interest in helping with the investigation and tried to prevent Mrs. Cheryl from participating in the search. Denise even prohibited Cheryl from speaking with her granddaughter. When questioned, Brian provided an alibi, claiming he was at home, 60 miles from the lake, on the morning of Mike's disappearance. His ex-wife, Kathy, corroborated his story. Brian also mentioned that he had planned to go hunting with his father-in-law that morning but overslept. Denise's interrogation did not reveal any new information. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement concluded that Mike's disappearance was not an accident, which is a criminal offense. However, due to insufficient evidence, they were unable to prosecute. Despite this, Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, continued to seek answers. The case was featured on the Discovery Cable channel in 2011, but Cheryl became increasingly frustrated with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, feeling that they were either incompetent or uninterested in solving the case. In 2012, She began writing daily letters to Governor Rick Scott, requesting that he either reassign the investigation to another agency or appoint a special prosecutor. Over the course of 9 years, Cheryl sent 2,600 letters to the governor. Meanwhile, Denise and Brian's marriage was deteriorating. In 2012, Denise discovered Brian's infidelity, leading to their breakup. Denise filed for divorce the following year. During the lengthy divorce proceedings, an appraisal of their former home was scheduled in an effort to resolve their property disputes. This brought progress in Mike's case, as tensions between Denise and Brian reached a boiling point. Brian wanted to continue the marriage, but Denise wanted a divorce because they were constantly arguing, and things were further complicated by the stress of Mike's investigation. Brian started calling Denise repeatedly, but she stopped answering his calls. He became overwhelmed by the stress in their relationship. On August 5, 2016, Denise was set to have her home appraised as part of a court order. That morning, she left her home to drive to work at Florida State University. While speaking with her sister on the phone, she noticed someone climbing over the back seat of her car. It was Brian. Brian pressed a loaded gun against Denise's and instructed her to drive straight ahead. Brian said he did this extreme thing because she had quit answering his phone calls. Denise attempted to calm Brian down by agreeing with him and promising to give their marriage another chance. Brian seemed to believe her. Denise assured him that she wouldn't report the incident to the police, and Brian exited the vehicle. As he left, he took several items with him, including a brown sheet, plastic sheeting, a bleach sprayer, and tools. It became clear that Denise had narrowly escaped a potentially fatal situation. She immediately called emergency services, and Brian was quickly arrested. He was charged with kidnapping, a first-degree felony in Florida that carries a maximum life sentence. He also faced charges of domestic violence and burglary. The court ordered Brian to be held without bail. Cheryl Williams expressed hope that Brian's arrest might lead to a breakthrough in her son's case. Cheryl shared with the New York Daily News, Brian did not want Denise to keep all that money for herself. Cheryl hoped Brian will reveal what really happened. And ultimately, Brian did share what had transpired. Brian managed to negotiate a very favorable deal with the prosecutor, avoiding a life sentence, and then began telling his story. He explained that it all started when he discovered a note in Kathy's purse, revealing that she was cheating on him. This sparked a desire for revenge in Brian. Around that time, Brian and his friends, including Denise and her husband Mike, would often go to bars and concerts together. Brian had known Denise since high school, but he had never been attracted to her until Kathy's infidelity. His perspective on Denise changed after being cheated on. In October 1997, Brian and Denise started an affair. Initially, it was just a casual encounter at a rock concert, but it quickly developed into regular and secret dates. They would meet at hotels during the workday whenever they had the chance. Brian made it clear that he did not want to divorce Kathy, and Denise was adamant that she would never leave her husband Mike, as she cared deeply about public opinion and did not want to risk losing custody of her daughter. As their relationship progresses, it deepens and they begin to consider themselves a couple, often exchanging gifts and writing romantic letters to each other. They realized they couldn't continue living like this, as they couldn't bear to be apart. However, Denise did not think about getting a divorce because she wanted people to think she was a good and moral person. Around this time, Mike had a near-death experience in a hunting accident, and Brian saved his life. This gave Denise a ray of hope that they could get out of their current situation. After negotiating the deal with the prosecutor, Brian revealed that in the year 2000, he and Denise started discussing the possibility of Mike and Kathy dying. Denise wanted to make it look like an accident rather than a murder. After considering various options, Brian and Denise planned to fake a boating accident. This would allow them to collect the maximum amount from Mike's life insurance policy before it expired at the end of December 2000. They devised a plan, and Brian invited Mike on a hunting trip to a spot on Lake Simol's shores, telling him to bring his wading boots. The boots were crucial, as it was believed that wearing them would lead to rapid drowning if Mike fell overboard. However, when Brian pushed Mike into the water, the plan didn't unfold as expected. Instead of sinking, Mike grabbed onto nearby stumps and began wading towards the shore. Brian was in a state of panic. He didn't know how to handle the situation. Mike was loudly calling for help, and Brian felt overwhelmed. In his panic, Brian grabbed his shotgun and shot Mike in the head without thinking. The plan had gone terribly wrong, and now Brian had to cover up the incident. Time was running out because he had to go home and prepare for a hunting trip with his father-in-law. Since no one knew Brian was at the lake with Mike, he decided to return home and pretend he had overslept. He drove back, hoping to find his wife, Kathy, still asleep. Brian entered the house quietly, finding Kathy asleep and his phone on the floor. He went to bed, called his father-in-law to apologize, and began creating an alibi for himself. Meanwhile, he hid Mike's body. Denise didn't know what really happened when Mike went missing. Brian attempted to confess to her, but she refused to listen. She preferred to believe that Mike's disappearance was an act of God, allowing her to move on with her life. According to Brian, he and Denise made a promise to each other to keep the truth hidden forever. Denise and Brian claimed that Mike's death was necessary because they couldn't live together. They stated that the life insurance payout was just an added benefit. Brian would later testify in court. However, investigators discovered that Brian had planted evidence, including a hat, boots, flashlight, and license, to mislead searchers and create false evidence to declare Mike dead, allowing Denise to collect the insurance. Denise received around $2 million, including Social Security and other benefits. On May 8, 2018, Denise was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and accessory to a felony, carrying a life sentence. She pleaded not guilty to all charges. In February 2019, Denise was sentenced to life in prison. 5 months later, her daughter Ansley received Mike's assets and insurance payout. Denise appealed the conviction and life sentence in January 2020. Her attorney arguing before the Florida First District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence of her direct involvement in the murder. In November 2020, Denise's murder conviction was overturned. However, her 30-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder was upheld, and she is currently serving her sentence at the Florida Women's Reception Center. Denise is expected to be released when she is 78 years old. Brian was transferred to the Madison Correctional Institute in Florida to serve the remainder of his sentence. He is scheduled to be released on July 30, 2036, when he will be 67 years old. Ansley, Mike and Denise's daughter, maintains her mother's innocence and blames Brian. Ansley has refused to speak to the media about the case and personal life. According to Cheryl and Nick, Ansley's uncle, they have been unable to reconnect with Ansley. Cheryl expressed her sorrow, stating that she has not only lost her son but also her connection with her granddaughter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Augustina M. Winkelried. Augustina M. Winkelried was born on June 6, 2001, in Esperanza, where she grew up in a big. As the baby of the family, she naturally received extra attention and affection. People who knew her described her as outgoing, kind-hearted, and always wearing a bright smile. On January 12, 2019, Augustina's father drove her to a friend's house, where a group of about 6 friends were meeting up. They planned to go to Teo's, a nightclub with a bowling alley, later that night. Augustina had already made plans to sleep over at her friend's house, and her father knew about these plans. Augustina left a club in the afternoon and went home. Later that night, she asked her boyfriend Noel to join her at the club, but he declined, saying he was tired. Augustina and her friends had a great time at the club, dancing and enjoying the music until 5 a.m., when they decided to leave. However, she ran into another group of friends and decided to stay longer. At 5:40 a.m., a surveillance camera showed Augustina leaving the club, carrying her phone. She then went to a nearby fast food stand, where she waited in line, got her order, and chatted briefly with someone she knew. After that, she headed towards the road. Since the friend's house where she was staying the night was close by, Augustina decided to walk. It was getting light, and she didn't seem concerned about her safety. There were no sidewalks, so she walked along the side of the road. Augustina's whereabouts on the night in question are unclear, but video footage shows she walked steadily despite wearing high-heeled platform shoes. The only moment of instability was when she approached the driveway, which is understandable given that it's an unpaved road with rocks. However, Augustina failed to arrive at her friend's house or her own home, which was unusual because she always kept her parents informed of her location. But on this occasion, when morning came, her parents didn't receive a text from her saying she had arrived safely. Concerned, Augustina's father, Daniel and Vincel Reed, contacted the police and began searching for his daughter on his own. After starting their investigation, police officers went to Teos's club to interview potential witnesses and review the available surveillance footage, since they knew Augustina had spent the entire night there. Meanwhile, a friend of Augustina's, Brian, reached out to her father, Daniel, and told him that he had seen Augustina outside Teo's club around 6 a.m. Brian was driving by when he noticed Augustina standing on the side of the road, talking to the driver of a silver car that had pulled over next to her. Brian continued driving down the road, but quickly pulled out his phone and called Augustina to check on her. He asked if she was all right and if she needed a ride home. Augustina replied that she was fine. Augustina accepted Brian's offer for a ride, saying she was headed to a friend's house. Brian decided to wait for her at a nearby gas station, which was just a few hundred meters away from where he first spotted her. He would fill up his car while waiting. However, 15 minutes passed, and Augustina failed to appear at the gas station. Brian then went to look for her, but she was nowhere to be found. Despite trying to contact her, Brian was unsuccessful as Augustina did not answer her phone. At the time, Brian didn't think much of it, assuming that Augustina had simply gone straight to her friend's house and forgotten that he was waiting. The main clue in this situation was the silver car. Although Brian couldn't identify the exact brand and model, he described it as fairly old. The man in the driver's seat may have been the last person to see Augustina before she disappeared. Police didn't rule out the possibility that he was involved in her disappearance. They tracked her cell phone signal and found that the last recorded signal was from a tower near the Taos Club. The search team focused on the vacant lots and fields around the club, which is on the outskirts of town. A nearby gas station was the only business with surveillance cameras along the road Augustina was walking on. Daniel, Augustina's father, reviewed the footage to see if his daughter had passed by the gas station. Since her friend's house was nearby, it's likely that Augustina would have walked past the gas station. The attendant showed Daniel the footage after he explained the situation and asked for help. The camera had recorded footage from that morning, but the attendant almost lost his job as a result. Later, the gas station owner fired the employee for letting someone watch the security footage without permission. However, when the townspeople found out, they boycotted the gas station, which led the owner to rehire the employee and apologize. Daniel reviewed the gas station's footage and couldn't find his daughter on it. It seemed Augustina never made it there. But the footage did show an old silver car, the same one Brian had described earlier, passing by the gas station around the time Augustina was walking on the road. The car was a Renault, and Daniel identified its owner as Pablo Trianfini, a 39-year-old garbage collector who lived nearby. Pablo had no prior convictions but had been on the police's radar several times. The first incident occurred in 2017 when Trianfini's ex-wife reported him to the police for physical abuse, leading to a court order that banned him from approaching her. He was arrested again in the same year for violating this order. After reviewing the surveillance footage, the police identified the silver car. However, upon learning that Daniel had already seen the video, they worried that a violent attack might occur and rushed to Pablo Trianfini's residence. When they arrived, they found a crowd gathered outside, shouting, "Where is Augustina?" The crowd dispersed after the police arrived, and someone informed the officers that Trianfini was inside the house. Trianfini had peeked out, but upon seeing the hostile crowd, he retreated back inside and locked the door. The police did not have sufficient reason to forcibly enter the house, so they requested a search warrant. While waiting for the search warrant, the police cordoned off the house to prevent Trianfini from escaping. Around midnight, an officer checked the yard and discovered that Pablo Trianfini had died. The officer rushed to assist, but it was too late, and Trianfini was deceased. Such a turn of events made Pablo Trianfini's involvement in Augustina's disappearance clear. However, after searching his house and car, the police still found no evidence. Trianfini attempted to deflect further suspicion by using a rope, but its purpose was unclear. As the police searched Trianfini's house, his neighbor approached them. The neighbor stated that earlier that day, Pablo had borrowed a shovel, claiming he needed to dig for earthworms for a fishing trip. About 30 minutes later, Trianfini returned the shovel and made a comment that struck his neighbor as odd. He thanked the neighbor and said, "Thank you, I don't know if I'll ever see you again." Witnesses reported seeing Trianfini leave his house multiple times on Sunday, riding his bicycle while carrying a shovel. This behavior suggested that Augustina might no longer be alive. On Monday, January 14, 2019, a search operation began at dawn, aided by drones and police dogs. At 9:15 a.m., Augustina's partially clothed body was found approximately 500 meters away from Taos Club, hidden in a ditch with dense vegetation. The forensic investigation revealed that Augustina had fiercely defended herself, resulting in defensive wounds on her hands and her attacker's skin under her fingernails. DNA analysis confirmed that Pablo Trianfini was the perpetrator. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation. The circumstances surrounding Augustina's entry into Trianfini's car remain unclear. It is unknown whether she was coerced or accepted a ride voluntarily. With both parties now unable to share their accounts, the truth may never be fully known. A search of Trianfini's phone did not yield any evidence of prior communication or connection with Augustina. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carly McBride. Carly McBride was born on April 14, 1983, to Steve McBride and Lorraine Williams. As a child, she was cheerful and close to her parents. However, as she grew older, Carly struggled with addiction to alcohol and illegal substances. Despite these challenges, she made efforts to overcome them. In 2014, at the age of 31, Carly lived in Belmont, New South Wales, Australia, with her two children, 7-year-old William and 3-year-old Cadence. On September 30, 2014, Carly's boyfriend, Sale, took her to Muswell Brook, where her daughter Cadence lived with her father, Andrew Easton. Carly spent a few hours with Cadence at Andrew's house, arriving around 12:30 p.m. Sale dropped her off but did not stay, agreeing to return later that day. However, when Sale came back to pick Carly up, she was no longer at Andrew's house. According to Andrew, Carly and he got into an argument, and she left, planning to walk to the nearby McDonald's restaurant, about 20 minutes away. Sale was surprised when Carly didn't call to let him know where to meet her, so he tried calling her instead. However, he couldn't reach her. Assuming she had said she was going to McDonald's, Sale drove there to look for her. Along the way, he kept an eye out for her, thinking she might be waiting somewhere. He considered the possibility that her phone was dead, but he couldn't find her anywhere. She wasn't at McDonald's or anywhere nearby. Sale spent some time driving around Muswellbrook, but it was all in vain. Carly had seemingly vanished. When Carly failed to return home to Belmont that evening, Sale contacted the police. The detectives asked him to describe what had happened. Sale explained that their routine was always the same. He would drop her off, she would get out of the car, wave goodbye, and then call and text him twice to let him know she was safe. But on this particular day, things didn't go as usual. Sale dropped her off at 12:30 p.m., but never heard from her again. Despite trying to call and text her, the phone just rang out. A key question emerged. Did Carly leave her ex-partner Andrew Easton's house, or was he hiding something? Andrew claimed to be the last person to see her, but no one else could confirm she actually left his house. The police questioned neighbors and people along the route Carly would have taken to get to McDonald's, but nobody reported seeing her. This lack of eyewitnesses only fueled suspicion about Andrew. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras near Andrew's house to verify his claim that Carly left around 2 p.m. The police searched fields behind a nearby residential area, but the chief investigator reported that nothing significant was found. The investigation will continue, and the police are urging anyone with information about Carly's disappearance to come forward. She was last seen wearing blue jeans, sandals, and a yellow t-shirt, and carrying a tan handbag. Police investigators obtained a search warrant and thoroughly searched the house where Carly was last seen, looking for clues that could help explain her disappearance. Despite their efforts, they found no evidence of criminal activity or new leads. However, they did stumble upon a suspicious discovery. Carly's Facebook account had been deleted just a few hours after she went missing, and before anyone had even reported her disappearance to the authorities. This mysterious deletion sparked a lot of questions and prompted further investigation. 9 months after Carly's disappearance, her parents, Steve and Lorraine Williams, sought assistance in finding their daughter. With the help of Detective Timothy Seymour, they made a public appeal, requesting any information that could aid in the case. During the appeal, Lorraine became emotional and pleaded for help, saying that if anyone knew anything, no matter how small, they should come forward and help them. The family has struggled since Carly's disappearance, with Steve and Lorraine explaining that their situation is complicated, particularly when it comes to Carly's children. The children have 2 different fathers, and the family has had limited contact with them. Steve and Lorraine hope that this will change, allowing them to reconnect with their grandchildren. Lorraine expressed the deep sorrow of Carly's children, who would never again experience their mother's loving kisses, warm hugs, and laughter. They were unable to say goodbye, and their memories were frozen in time. She described the family's pain and frustration, feeling trapped in limbo, and emphasized their need to find Carly and give her dignity and respect in death. Carly's children, William and Cadence, needed to know what happened to their mother to heal and move forward, free from the burden of pain and uncertainty. Lorraine begged for the truth, expressing that while her daughter was gone, her children needed closure and justice. She implored the responsible person to come forward, break their silence, and let the family find peace. The police shifted their focus to Sale Newson, another possible suspect, as they were unable to connect Carly's disappearance to her ex-partner, Andrew Easton. Investigations revealed that Carly and Sale's relationship was troubled. Sale was extremely jealous, which often sparked their arguments, despite their relatively short time together. Although Sale publicly claimed to be deeply in love with Carly, saying she was the first woman he had loved in 14 years, his actions told a different story. He started intimate relationships with other women almost immediately, even offering sex to several women just hours after reporting Carly missing. On October 2nd, just 2 days after Carly's disappearance, Sale spent the night with another woman, yet in public, he pretended to be grief-stricken over losing the love of his life. Detectives also learned that Sale and Carly had an argument 2 days before she vanished, triggered by Facebook messages from other men. However, while this evidence was suspicious, it was still circumstantial, and the police needed more concrete evidence to bring charges against Sale Newson. In 2015, authorities searched 3 properties in Muswellbrook and Scone, Unsolved, seizing 3 firearms, illegal substances, and arresting 24-year-old James Kineen, unrelated to Carly's disappearance, but a notable name in the investigation. 2 years after, on September 30, 2014, the police investigation had stalled with no new leads. But on August 7, 2016, a major breakthrough came when 2 pedestrians stumbled upon human remains in a shallow grave in a bush off the road near Scone. Forensic analysis confirmed that the remains were indeed those of Carly McBride. The police waited 4 days before announcing the discovery, hoping to gather more evidence. Carly's parents, who are still grieving, are asking the public to come forward with any information they might have. They are thankful for the help that led to finding their daughter's body, but they still want to know who was responsible for her disappearance and are seeking closure. Over 10 months, investigators probed a case leading to Sale Newson's arrest warrant on June 19, 2017. After his arrest, Newson denied involvement in Carly McBride's death. Authorities also charged James Kineen, 26, for helping Newson dispose of the body. The 3 knew each other from a rehab center for addicts, staying in touch despite leaving at different times. The trial of Sale Newson began in 2018 and lasted for years due to limited evidence. Prosecutors claimed Newson attacked Carly in a jealous rage, causing her death. Forensic experts found she died from multiple blunt force trauma, including 23 skull fractures and 13 torso and spinal fractures. The judge ruled Newson's actions caused Carly's death, noting he had claimed to be a skilled mixed martial arts fighter with 20 undefeated fights. The judge concluded Carly died from severe brain trauma caused by a high degree of force to the head, likely inflicted by Newson's fists, feet, or objects. During a search of Newson's house, police found a map in a shoebox under the bed with a circle around Muswellbrook and Scone, where Carly's remains were later found. The map also had numbers 1, 2, and 3 written on it, which a senior constable linked to point-to-point cameras. Newson mentioned to Carly's father that the skeleton was missing hand bones, a detail only known to the police, Carly's parents, and the forensic medicine department. This suggested Newson was familiar with the crime scene and had left Carly's body there. The clothes on the remains matched what she wore on the day she disappeared, indicating she died soon after leaving her partner's house. The police couldn't find her purse and phone. When police searched Newson's mobile phone, they discovered he had deleted Google location services between September 18th and October 2nd, 2014. During the trial, the investigators learned that the photo of Carly, which Newson took on the way to Muswellbrook and later used in missing person flyers, was edited and cropped even before the police received the report of Carly missing. When the search for Carly began, Newson offered a $20,000 reward for information about her whereabouts. However, his bank account showed he was broke, which meant he offered the reward only because he knew no one would ever find her. Thus, he wouldn't have to pay. Newson injected himself into the police investigation from the start, trying to deflect suspicion onto others and attempting to get information about where police and other emergency services would be searching. He also conducted a canvass of the neighboring streets, searching for CCTV or witnesses, which police said was done not to find information, but to suppress it and to determine if anyone had seen him intercepting Ms. McBride. While volunteers and police searched for her around Muswellbrook and handed out missing person flyers, Newson was in Sydney messaging friends about how he was driving an Audi R8. The more investigators dug into Newson, interviewed him, looked at his Facebook messages, listened to his phone calls. After examining his internet search history, investigators discovered that he was looking for information on how to delete a Facebook account. His account remained active, but Carly's account got deleted shortly after. Although all the evidence was circumstantial, the prosecutors said they did have puzzle pieces that began to reveal a picture when put together. Eventually, these pieces turned into an irrefutable case, ruling out any other possible explanations for how Carly McBride disappeared and how her body was about 82 feet from the side of the road. The judge found that Newson's motive for suddenly and violently attacking Carly was jealousy. Newson had gone to pick Carly up from Muswell Brook, expecting her to have spent time with her daughter as planned. Instead, he discovered she had met her ex-partner for 90 minutes. This revelation allegedly triggered a fit of jealousy in Newson, leading him to brutally attack Carly. Carly's mother, Lorraine Williams, recounted the immense grief and anxiety she experienced during a 2-year wait for justice, a wait that ended with the devastating realization that her happy and outgoing daughter would never come home to her 2 young children. When she finally saw Carly again, it was in the morgue, an experience she described as the worst day of her life. In December 2021, 43-year-old Newson was found guilty and sentenced to 27 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 2038, nearly 7 years after reporting Carly missing. Despite the guilty verdict, Newson maintained his innocence, stating to the judge. Newson's accomplice, James Canine, also denied his involvement but was found guilty by a jury in July 2022. The judge determined that Canine had lied to police 3 times to create a false alibi for Newson and deleted phone data to conceal his actions. At the time of his involvement in the Carly McBride case, Canine was already in prison for illegal weapons possession and prohibited substances. In November 2022, he was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison with a 4-year parole period, showing little reaction to the news. After the trial, Carly's parents expressed relief that justice had been served, but they also acknowledged that no matter the outcome, they would never be able to get their daughter back. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Catherine Wells Burr. Catherine Wells Burr was born in 1989 in the United Kingdom to parents Phil and Jane Wells Burr. She had an older sister named Lynn. During her 2010 university break, Catherine met Rafal Novak, a 31-year-old employee, on a new vacuum cleaner production line. Rafal, a tall, handsome blonde from Poland, caught her attention. He had moved to England about 4 years earlier, leaving behind a former wife and son. Catherine and Rafal started dating, initially meeting for lunch at the production site's cafe. However, their lunches soon turned into romantic dinners. Rafal wooed Catherine with thoughtful gestures, such as giving her beautiful bouquets, taking her to movies, and going on walks together. As they grew closer, Rafal opened up to Catherine about his past life and his reasons for moving to the UK. Catherine's trusting nature led her to open up completely to the blonde man, Rafal Novak. Their relationship accelerated rapidly, and within a few months, she introduced him to her parents, who warmly welcomed him into the family and hoped for their future happiness together. As their relationship blossomed, the couple began planning their wedding, which was set to take place in 2011. After graduating with honors from Bath Spa University, Catherine secured a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the manufacturer of Henry vacuum cleaners. She quickly excelled in her career, generating job opportunities for her parents and sister. Catherine's exceptional qualities, including her intelligence, education, and people skills, made her a remarkable leader. She was empathetic towards her colleagues, always willing to lend a helping hand, and her kind gaze and radiant smile earned her the respect and admiration of those around her. As Catherine's career soared, her substantial earnings, combined with Rafal's, enabled them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace on Willow Way. Catherine and Raphael, a young couple with successful careers, bought a house with a mortgage and secured insurance coverage through their agreement with the bank. They seemed to have everything they needed for happiness. However, their lives took a dramatic turn on September 12, 2012, a day that would be a turning point in their lives. As the investigation into their lives progressed, new and surprising facts came to light. These revelations slowly exposed the deception that had been present in their relationship from the beginning. It turned out that Raphael, 29, had fled Poland to escape significant debts, leaving behind a wife and child. He moved to the UK, where he began a relationship with Anna Lovich in 2008. Later, he met Catherine Wellsburr, and for a time, he saw both women. Ultimately, he chose Catherine, seeing her as a more suitable partner for building a family and achieving financial stability. Catherine had genuine dreams of a happy marriage with the man she loved and starting a family. However, Novak, her partner, was secretly planning to murder her. He intended to use the life insurance payout and inherit their large house, which Catherine had partially paid for. On the day Catherine disappeared, Novak waited a few hours before approaching her boss, pretending to be worried and distraught. He acted convincingly, deceiving her colleagues and relatives. When Catherine could not be found at her parents' home or her own, and her car was missing, Novak fabricated a story about her receiving threatening letters from a mentally unstable admirer. Her family then contacted the police. The family gathered in the young couple's living room, waiting for Catherine's return, when they received devastating news. A burning car with a body inside had been found. Raphael described the evening before her disappearance as uneventful, saying they went for a walk, bought groceries, had dinner, and watched TV together before bedtime. Catherine seemed normal and not frightened or distressed. However, further investigation revealed that Catherine's death occurred earlier than initially thought. She was strangled around 2 a.m. while sleeping in her own bed. Her body was then placed in the car, driven a short distance from the house, and set on fire to destroy evidence. Despite this, Raphael had a solid alibi, claiming he was at work from 5:30 a.m. and Catherine was still in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m., but a crucial detail emerged. Raphael was still at home at 1:30 a.m., significantly changing the direction of the case. As a result, Raphael Novak became the prime suspect in Catherine Wellsburr's murder. Evidence mounted against him, and he was detained for further investigation. Raphael claimed Catherine was being stalked by someone who had sent her threatening letters and driven her to hysteria. During the investigation, proof of Catherine's secret online life was uncovered, revealing accounts on adult websites and intimate exchanges with men that her loved ones knew nothing about. A letter from a secret admirer was also found, but despite attempts to hide the truth, the evidence ultimately came to light. Raphael tried to mislead the investigation, but he made a critical mistake by not destroying key evidence that linked him directly to Catherine's death. This oversight gave the prosecution a motive to pursue. Examination of Novak's phone revealed that he had ongoing communication and meetings with Anna Lovich over the past few months. Further investigation revealed that Raphael also had a financial motive. Shortly before Catherine's death, they had taken out life insurance policies worth £123,000, with each other as the sole beneficiaries. The significant life insurance payout emerged as the primary motive behind Catherine's murder, and the arson of her car, which was intended to throw off the investigation. On the day Catherine disappeared, police found a message on Anna Lovich's phone from Catherine. They also discovered that Anna and her uncle had filled a gas canister at a gas station a few days before the crime. This led them to suspect Anna and her uncle, Todd Dmitry Shin, of being involved in Catherine's disappearance and trying to cover their tracks with arson. The investigation revealed that Anna, her uncle, and a third person had planned the crime meticulously over several months. They created fake accounts on pornographic websites, uploaded doctored photos of Catherine, and fabricated conversations with men to mislead the investigation. However, when confronted with the evidence, Anna and her uncle eventually cracked and started pointing fingers at each other. Anna accused Novak of killing someone for insurance money, while Novak claimed Anna did it out of jealousy towards a rival. The true culprits crafted a deceitful narrative around an innocent young woman, Catherine. They created fake online profiles for her, suggesting she was looking for casual sexual encounters. To cover their tracks, the conspirators went to great lengths to mislead investigators. They set Catherine's body on fire and fabricated a fake history for her, portraying her as a secretive and promiscuous person with many desires. They even created the illusion of a mysterious lover who might have killed her. One of them sent a text from Catherine's phone at 5:17 a.m. on the day she died, implying she was on her way to meet this fictional person. When forensic experts investigated the car fire, they found that Catherine was wearing her favorite nightgown, not the outfit she would have worn to meet a man, as she had claimed. This discovery led them to suspect that she was attacked in her own home rather than in the car. The police also found that a pillow was missing from her bed, and the remaining pillowcase had been recently washed and hung to dry. Further investigation revealed a SIM card in Anna Lovi's trash bin that was linked to the phone number Catherine had supposedly used to send texts that morning. Additionally, detectives discovered notes written by Lovi, indicating that she was trying to come up with ideas for messages to make it seem like Catherine was communicating with a mysterious person. As the evidence against them mounted, Novak and Linovit changed their story, claiming that Catherine's death was actually the work of a hired hitman. However, just before the trial began, Lovi attempted to create a distraction by having a fellow inmate pass on a fake confession from a supposed hitman who claimed to have been paid £20,000 by Novak to kill Catherine. Rafal Novak's girlfriend Catherine was murdered, and a fictional story written by Vinovich sheds light on the gruesome details. The story claims that Catherine's body was found in the trunk of her car, and the killer, supposedly a hitman, helped Novak stage her death to look like a murder-suicide. According to the story, Novak placed Catherine's body in the driver's seat, removed the tape from her mouth, put on her shoes, buckled her seatbelt, and kissed her goodbye before setting the car on fire. In reality, Novak played the role of a grieving boyfriend to perfection, even convincing Catherine's mother, Jane, of his innocence. He told her that Catherine was receiving threatening messages from an ex-boyfriend and that she had spoken of taking her own life. Novak's act was so convincing that Catherine's parents comforted him, unaware that he was responsible for their daughter's death. In fact, Catherine's mother even hugged Novak after her death and allowed him to call her mom. She said that after the police told her in the early days of the investigation that he was seen more as a witness than a suspect, she decided to offer him all the support possible. "I thought if Catherine loved him that much, and he was part of our family, then he deserved to come back." The lengthy trial commenced under the chairmanship of Justice Sharp. The three defendants stood to gain a significant sum of money and property from Catherine Wells Burr's death. They had planned to receive a £123,000 life insurance payout and take ownership of her two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000. During the trial, it was revealed that Rafal Novak showed no emotional response when the police found Catherine's body in her burned-out car on September 12th. Meanwhile, Anna Lagvinovich frequently shook her head and laughed during the proceedings, implying that Novak was responsible for the crime. However, she refused to testify in her own defense. Dmitry Sheen also chose not to take the stand. According to reports, Judge Justice Sharp delivered a scathing rebuke to the defendants, in which she characterized the murder as a terrible, merciless crime that had been cold-bloodedly committed with a gross breach of trust. Furthermore, it was reported that during sentencing, none of the three defendants displayed any emotion. Judge Sharp imposed mandatory life sentences on the three Polish nationals, with a minimum of 32 years in prison and no possibility of early release. According to Judge Sharp, the defendants had taken the life of a beautiful young woman who had everything to live for, solely for financial gain. Judge Sharp specifically rebuked Rafal Novak, saying, "The photos of you holding Catherine's hand the evening before her death and buying groceries for what you knew was her last dinner are utterly chilling. Your emotions were directed only at yourself." Turning to Anna Lagvinovich, Judge Sharp declared, "Your behavior was deceitful, manipulative, and cruel. You played your full part in this horrendous crime." The judge addressed Dmitry, stating that the murder was driven by financial gain, with aggravating circumstances and no mitigating factors. The judge emphasized that the only sympathy should be reserved for Catherine's family, including her mother Jane, father Philip, and sister Lynn, who have suffered greatly. The judge expressed deep condolences to Catherine's parents, noting that they were deceived by Rafal Novak's facade, unaware of his true nature, which was devoid of remorse and decency. The judge reiterated that the crime was motivated by greed, as Novak and Catherine had no personal ties, being neither married nor having children together. In contrast, the case of Anna Lavinovich was driven by jealousy and a desire for revenge. At the request of the parents, Judge Justice Sharp read statements from Catherine's mother and sister. Catherine's mother was overcome with emotion in the courtroom as her statement was read, describing her daughter as a caring, loving, sincere, generous, loyal, thoughtful, exceptional, and amazing young woman. "My daughter had a bright and promising future with unlimited potential." As her parents, Phil and I couldn't help but feel immense pride in the young woman she was becoming. However, our lives were forever changed by the cruel and calculated act that took Catherine's life away from us. The hatred shown to her is something that will haunt us for the rest of our lives. I'm left with the unbearable pain of never having had the chance to say goodbye, to tell her how much I love her, or to hear her say, "I love you, Mommy," one last time. Catherine Wells-Burr's father, Philip, was outraged that his daughter's boyfriend, Rafal Novak, had betrayed their trust. Novak had been living with them and was like a son, but he was accused of murdering Catherine. Despite his innocent claims, Novak showed no emotion when Catherine's body was found, and initially didn't mention her when questioned by police. Instead, he asked for a steak dinner. Catherine's mother, Jane Wells-Burr, testified that she had concerns about Novak when he and Catherine bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy. She believed Catherine's life was in danger and that she had signed her own death warrant by signing the mortgage. In the end, the jury found Novak guilty of murdering Catherine by suffocating her with a pillow while she slept. He had planned the murder with his secret lover, Anna Lagvinovich, and her uncle, Tavush Dmitry Shine, to claim a life insurance payout of £123,000 and a share of the house. Vinovich and Sheen helped dispose of the body by transporting it in Vinovich's car to a remote location where they set it on fire. Meanwhile, Novak had already started his workday, providing himself with an alibi. The three Polish nationals were found guilty of the crime by the Royal Court of Bristol. The events leading up to the murder involved secret meetings and phone calls between Novak and Vinovich, who were unaware that Catherine was involved in a love triangle. To mislead detectives, they created fake online profiles for Catherine on adult websites and sent her messages from a supposed mysterious admirer. Catherine's parents have called for stricter immigration controls following her death. They believe that if the UK had immigration rules as strict as those in the US, Novak, who was convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland, would not have been allowed into the country. The couple blames the European Union for the current lax entry measures for foreign nationals. Jane Wells-Burr emphasized that people entering the UK are not properly vetted, pointing out that they were unaware of Novak's previous assault charge in Poland. Catherine's family members broke down in tears as the sentence was handed down in court, while the three convicted perpetrators remained emotionless. The trio received life sentences with no possibility of parole. In essence, the three immigrants from Poland had exchanged their aspirations for a successful and wealthy life for a lifetime of imprisonment due to their own actions. Following the verdict, Catherine's mother delivered a heartfelt tribute to her daughter, describing her as a beautiful girl, absolutely beautiful. She recalled her daughter's accomplishments and remembered her as determined, hardworking, and full of potential for a happy life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Lang. Michelle was an intelligent and motivated individual who enrolled in the University of Technology in Sydney, where she studied economics and hospitality management. She was an adventurous person who loved to travel, take risks, and explore new places. Her social media profiles revealed a vibrant personality who enjoyed posting photos and videos of her outings with friends. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Michelle posted videos and photos from her trips to various locations in New South Wales. On June 13, 2013, she visited Snapper Point, where she took a prophetic photo of herself on the edge of a cliff. Michelle was confident, outgoing, and had a busy life, balancing her studies with a part-time job and a social life. Michelle Lang went to a mall on April 2, 2016, and boarded a train after lunch. She got off at a station around 4:30 p.m. and was never seen again. 2 days later, her uncle went to the train station to meet his wife, who had returned from a business trip. And that's when they realized Michelle was missing. Her family became worried when they couldn't contact her, as she was always in daily contact with friends and family members living in China and Australia. They inspected her room, which was in complete order, and looked through her laptop, concluding that she hadn't returned from her day out. On April 24, 2016, a body was found by tourists at Snapper Point, and a compiled sketch of the victim confirmed it was Michelle. The police took 3 days to officially identify her and launch an investigation. The first theory was that Michelle had been attacked by an unknown person she had planned to meet that day. However, CCTV cameras showed Michelle was alone on the day of her disappearance, and her friends said she had no plans to meet anyone. An investigation into her social networks and correspondence found no evidence of a secret meeting. The autopsy revealed Michelle's body had multiple injuries, including stab wounds, indicating she had tried to fight off her attacker. The police believe she was brutally assaulted before her death, but it's unclear who could have attacked her in such a lonely area. Forensic evidence showed Michelle's body had been in the water for less than 48 hours, meaning it was likely dumped recently. The police studied CCTV and traffic cameras to determine Michelle's last movements and continued to interview her family members, friends, and co-workers for additional information. Police Inspector Gary Jubilin said Michelle was a responsible person who always stayed in touch with her family, which made her disappearance unusual. The police were suspicious of Derek Barrett, Michelle's uncle, who had been unemployed and often stayed up late, but they found no evidence linking him to the crime. The investigators began questioning Derek about his relationship with Michelle and asked him to recall the last time he had seen her. Under pressure, Derek refused to answer and demanded a lawyer. This suspicious behavior raised doubts, leading to his arrest as a suspect. Before the interrogation, investigators had checked Derek's cell phone signal and found that he was in the same area where Michelle's body was later discovered on April 24th. Surveillance footage from a parking lot also showed a car matching the description of Derek's vehicle in the early morning hours of April 24th. Despite Derek's denials, the footage proved his presence in the parking lot. The police charged Derek, 27, with the murder of 25-year-old Michelle Lang, whose naked body with multiple stab wounds was found in a hole on the central Nurauder coast. Michelle's family was left in shock, especially her mother, who was devastated by the news. Police released CCTV footage showing Michelle's last shopping trip in Sydney's central business district on April 21st. The footage showed her shopping at a Pitt Street mall and boarding a train at St. James Station. Police believe Michelle returned to her family home in the afternoon, where she lived with her uncle, aunt, and cousin. She was presumed to have been murdered at home. The autopsy revealed that Michelle had tried to fight off her attacker and was stabbed multiple times in defense. CCTV footage also captured a vehicle entering Lake Moan-Morick National Park at around 7 a.m. on April 24th, with Michelle's body believed to be inside. Despite Derek being detained and charged, the investigation continued, and further details of Michelle's final minutes surfaced. Additional charges were laid, including 5 counts of indecent assault, 2 counts of installing a filming device, and murder. The investigation revealed that Derek had an unhealthy sexual interest in his wife's young niece. Analysis of Derek's cell phone found previously deleted data, including files that left no doubt about his involvement in Michelle's death and his unhealthy interest in her. The phone contained images taken just before Michelle's death, showing her returning home on April 21st around 5 p.m. and sending her last text message around midnight. Derek had set up a hidden camera in the shared bathroom, which he regularly reviewed. The phone also contained images of Michelle taken before her death. It appeared that Derek had entered Michelle's room around midnight, attempting to take photos and videos of her while she was asleep. However, Michelle woke up, and Derek attacked her, tying her up and putting duct tape over her mouth. He kept her tied to the bed for 2 days, periodically abusing her and taking photos. Michelle was still alive on April 23rd when Derek took a picture of her around 8 a.m. Later that day, Derek's stepson came home twice but didn't hear Michelle's quiet moans because Derek was taking a shower at the time. Surveillance cameras showed that Derek left the apartment 4 times to take out the trash, presumably after Michelle had already died. During this time, Derek cleaned the house thoroughly, washing away any traces of blood and hiding evidence of the crime and Michelle's disappearance. The next day, April 24th, at 7 a.m., Derek drove to Snapper Point, stopping at a gas station to buy drinks and fill up his car with gas, where he was caught on CCTV cameras. When he arrived at Snapper Point, he got rid of Michelle's body and took some pictures around 9 a.m. Afterwards, he visited his parents, who didn't notice anything unusual about his behavior, and then returned home, waiting for his wife to return. Derek reported that he hadn't seen Michelle and that she hadn't come home, even accompanying his wife to the police station to file a missing persons report. On June 29, 2016, the first court hearing was held, and Derek's lawyer, Bill Whitby, told the court that Derek was pleading not guilty and was as shocked and upset by Michelle's death as the rest of the family. However, it was revealed that Derek had taken illegal drugs the day before killing Michelle, and he claimed to have only vague memories of the 2-hour trip to Snapper Point, where he threw Michelle's body off the cliff. Forensic psychologist Dr. Richard first disputed Derek's claims of memory loss, testifying that Derek was mentally fit to be punished to the full extent of his sentence. Dr. First testified that the drugs Derek was taking did not cause memory loss, and that all of his actions, from the murder to the disposal of the body, were clear and purposeful. The doctor also stated that Derek's IQ, concentration, and memory were within normal limits, and that the number of stab wounds indicated sadistic tendencies rather than memory lapses. The psychologist rejected Derek's claim that he did not feel sexually attracted to the victim and believed that Derek faked amnesia to avoid taking responsibility for the crime. A doctor, Richard, disputed Derek Barrett's claim, stating it was self-defeating because it was clear that the suspect had gained weight during the time period in question. Judge Wilson, a seasoned criminal defense attorney with 30 years of experience, expressed her skepticism about Derek Barrett's behavior in the courtroom, describing it as insincere and akin to that of a psychopath. She believed that Barrett's crime was not the result of a drunken night or poor life choices, but rather a deliberate act. During the retrial hearing, Barrett pleaded guilty to murdering and kidnapping Michelle Lang, as well as sneaking into her room while she slept and making videos. He also admitted taking 19 explicit photos of her shortly before her death. Barrett claimed he couldn't remember the 48-hour period during which he committed the crime because he was under the influence of illegal substances. Judge Wilson, however, did not believe Barrett's claim of memory loss, nor did she believe he was genuinely sorry for his actions. The Lang family consoled each other while Barrett wiped away tears and said that he deserved to live and that this should never have happened. Judge Wilson sentenced Barrett to 34 years and 6 months in prison with a maximum term of 46 years. He will be eligible for parole in 2050. Barrett showed no emotion when sentenced. Michelle's mother, Mrs. Jiang, thanked the Australian and Chinese communities for their support during her time of grief. She also thanked the Nurauder police, including Detective Inspector Gary Jubilin, for investigating her daughter's death. A fund was set up to pay for Miss Lang's funeral and to support her mother when she returns to China. Tragically, Michelle Lang's story did not end there. 4 years after the crime, inexplicable events occurred in one family where a woman often visited her elderly mother. In a surprising discovery, a woman found an unknown USB device in her elderly mother's hands during a visit. When the daughter plugged the USB drive into her computer, she was shocked to find graphic videos and photos of obscene content. The police were contacted, and an investigation revealed that the USB drive contained 9 video files lasting over an hour and 13 files with photos of Michelle Lang being abused shortly before her murder on April 23, 2016. The woman who found the USB drive lived about 4 miles from Derek Barrett's former home and had no discernible connection to him. It remains a mystery where the USB drive came from and how it ended up in the woman's family home. Police were able to match the photos on the USB drive to those that Derek Barrett had deleted from his phone before his arrest in an attempt to hide his crimes. In 2020, Barrett was charged with multiple sex offenses after the disturbing content was found on the USB drive in November 2019. Prosecutors admitted they were stumped by the discovery of the device, which led to new charges. The elderly woman with dementia was confined to her home, and it is unclear how the USB drive ended up in her possession. Thanks to the new evidence, Derek Barrett's sentence was extended without parole. The horrific discovery of the USB drive in the hands of an elderly woman in a leafy Sydney suburb resulted in the convicted criminal receiving additional years of punishment. The story of Michelle Lang stands as a heartbreaking reminder to appreciate the preciousness of life, since the future is uncertain and can change in an instant. After her passing, tributes poured in from friends and acquaintances on Chinese and Australian social media, emphasizing the devastating and lasting effects of bullying, fear, and criminal behavior. Hello, friends. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maricela Botella Valadez. Maricela Botella Valadez was born in 1997 in Seattle, Washington. She was the eldest of 2 children in a family of Latin American descent. People described her as a sweet, sociable young woman who always had many friends, performed well in school, and after graduating, became a student at a prestigious university. Furthermore, Maricela was considered truly beautiful, petite, slim, with big brown eyes, luxurious hair, and a flawless figure. On Saturday, October 3, 2020, she flew to Dallas to meet up with old friends. However, by Monday morning, she planned to return. Her brother was supposed to meet her at the airport on October 5th, after which they would head to the university together. But the plane arrived without her. The search for her began when her brother realized she was not among the passengers from the flight. Concerned, he tried to call her, but her phone was turned off. He then called their parents to inform them about the situation. Since Maricela was a serious and responsible young woman, her disappearance without warning and not showing up for university classes was out of character. The family started calling her friends in Dallas, trying to find out where she might have gone and where she was last seen. It turned out that the night before, she had been partying at one of the city's most popular clubs, where she met a black man named Chuck. The pair danced, enjoyed themselves, and had alcoholic drinks, after which they disappeared together. Maricela was not seen again, and her phone went unanswered. The information seriously alarmed and frightened her parents, so they immediately decided to report her disappearance to the police. It turned out that the young woman had indeed bought tickets for a flight to Seattle, but for some reason she had not boarded the plane. No one had seen her since that night, and no one knew where she might be. The officers reviewed external surveillance camera footage, which showed she leaving with a young man whose face was unclear. The footage suggested she was walking with him voluntarily. They got into a black Audi and drove away in an unknown direction. Days passed without contact or signs of life from her. She hadn't logged into her social media accounts, and there were no transactions on her bank cards. The police needed to identify the mysterious man she was with to determine where to look for her. One of her friends mentioned that her companion might be named Chuck, but that information was insufficient. Fortunately, street camera footage helped investigators determine the direction the car traveled. The pair was also caught on camera at a supermarket, where they appeared happy and affectionate. The young woman picked out drinks and candies, and the young man paid using a card in the name of Charles Beltran. It was discovered that Beltran, a 31-year-old musician, had a criminal past, including 2 incarcerations for robbery and armed assault. He had recently been released on parole and was preparing to release his own music album. Investigators tracked down his address and found that her phone had been active at that location on the night she disappeared. When police visited the address with an FBI agent, they found the house empty, but managed to contact the owner, Lisa Dyke, by phone. She claimed Charles Beltran had been renting a room from her, but moved out 2 weeks prior, and she had no knowledge of his whereabouts. With the sole suspect unlocated, law enforcement obtained a warrant to search the house. What they found was alarming and frightening. The house was in disarray, with dirty dishes, moldy food, and trash scattered everywhere. It seemed as though the occupants had left in a hurry, taking only essentials. Notably, numerous empty bottles of cleaning and detergent products were found, with traces on the floors and carpets, indicating a thorough cleaning had taken place. In one of the upstairs rooms, a black statue of death, resembling the Mexican cult of Santa Muerte, was set up as an altar with wax candles, dried flowers, and 2 metal bowls. A thorough examination of the house revealed wiped blood stains in one of the bedrooms, the bathroom, and the hallway. The bedroom with the blood-soaked carpet belonged to Charles Beltran. It was clear that a violent crime had taken place, but the identity of the victim was unknown. The occupants had hastily cleaned up and fled, but traces of blood remained, having seeped into the carpet, under the baseboards, and onto the wallpaper and furniture. DNA experts compared the found bloodstains to Maricela's DNA, dispelling any doubts that the blood belonged to her. The house was sealed as a crime scene, and the task was to find the main suspect. However, Charles had fled, and the owner had already put the house up for sale. To learn more, the police decided to investigate the backgrounds of everyone who had recently lived in the house. Neighbors revealed that 3 people lived in the house: 57-year-old Lisa Dyke, 48-year-old Nina Morano, and 31-year-old Charles Beltran. However, the nature of their relationships and their sudden disappearance remained unclear. It was necessary to investigate each individual's background and find and interrogate them as soon as possible. The house owner, Lisa Dyke, was a commanding, ambitious, and contentious woman who had been married 3 times and received a substantial inheritance after becoming a widow. She had no financial necessity to rent a room to Charles, suggesting she had some other interest in him. Charles, or Chuck, Beltran dreamed of making it big in the music scene, but he lacked money and connections, and his criminal past hindered him. Lisa Dyke helped him by moving him into her house, setting up a small recording studio, and even sponsoring the filming of several music videos for him. She also bought him a car, paid for his entertainment, and fashionable clothes, claiming their relationship was strictly business and that she saw great potential in the talented young man. About Nina Murano. She and Lisa had been in an intimate relationship for a long time and had officially legalized their union by getting married several months ago. A close friend revealed that Lisa had an intimate relationship with Charles, which drove her insane with jealousy. Charles also had a vested interest in living with a wealthy older lover who solved all his financial problems and helped him build a music career. Charles frequently engaged in brief, casual relationships with young women, which fueled Lisa's intense jealousy. However, what role did Nina Murano play in the disappearance of Maricela, and how did she fit into Charles's love triangle? According to a close friend, Lisa's spouse, Charles, was part of this unusual love triangle with Nina, and he insisted that his young lover sleep with both women. After their wedding, both women took Charles's last name, and the household consisted of Charles, Lisa, and Nina Beltran. The investigation into Maricela's disappearance revealed that no one had been seen at the house where her blood was found, and Lisa was only contacted once. She claimed to be in another state and then ceased responding to calls. The whereabouts of Nina and Charles, the main suspect, were also unknown. Mobile phone signals indicated that on the night of October 5th, all four individuals, including Maricela, were at the house. By early morning, their device signals had moved to a suburban area of Dallas, where they eventually disappeared. A few days later, Lisa responded from her second work phone, which also became unreachable. Using geolocation data from the mobile devices, the route the group took that night was traced, and the stops they made were identified. It was presumed that they might have disposed of Maricela's body in that area, defining a broad search radius. However, the search operation was slow and eventually halted due to the vast and difficult-to-navigate area. In March 2021, a local hunter stumbled upon a human skull in the woods, which was later identified as Maricela's through dental records. Although the advanced state of decomposition and animal damage made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, characteristic marks on the bones suggested knife wounds. The authorities soon tracked down Lisa, who had moved to Florida with Nina and rented a house in Miami. However, only Nina was apprehended, while Charles went into hiding. Although he occasionally communicated with former girlfriends, he left no traces of his whereabouts. Nina, now incarcerated, refused to provide any information, claiming she knew nothing about Maricela's fate. Meanwhile, Lisa attempted to hire a good lawyer for her spouse using her connections. It emerged that Nina had put her house in South Carolina up for sale, indicating that she needed the money to continue hiding or leave the country. A month after her disappearance, authorities found and arrested Lisa, and both women were taken back to Dallas. During initial questioning, they refused to cooperate, and each was held on a $500,000 bond. They managed to post bail and were released under house arrest, wearing tracking bracelets to monitor their movements. However, they made a daring escape attempt in August of that year. Meanwhile, the police tracked Charles to Utah, where he was hiding at the home of one of his ex-girlfriends. She was raising a 5-year-old son fathered by Beltran and was thrilled to see him, not questioning his sudden return. Charles initially refused to testify or cooperate with the police, hoping his wealthy lover would use her money and connections to hire a good lawyer and help him avoid prison. However, the situation changed drastically on Christmas Eve 2012. The tracking bracelets worn by Lisa and Nina suddenly went offline due to holiday chaos, and it took until the next day for the police to arrive at their location. By then, the suspects were gone. It turned out they had been planning their escape for months and had already crossed the border into Mexico. From there, they flew to South Korea, where their trail was lost in Cambodia. The FBI joined the investigation, working with Cambodian police and immigration services to track down the fugitives. She came under law enforcement's radar after withdrawing a large sum of money from an ATM. They tried to pay in cash everywhere to avoid revealing their whereabouts, but ATM cameras helped identify them, and a neighboring building's camera captured the license plate number of the car they arrived in. This information led the police to the driver, who took them to the house rented by the extravagant foreigners. They were arrested and extradited to the US in February 2022, where they were denied bail and sent directly to jail. Charles, realizing his lover was not going to save him from prison, began to cooperate with the investigation and provided information. His account of the events of that dreadful night horrified many. Charles confessed that he had been in an intimate relationship with the homeowner, Lisa, and her spouse, and that he engaged in these relationships for money and to advance his music career. He had no warm feelings towards her and often had affairs with young and attractive women, which he never hid. While Lisa sometimes became wildly jealous, Na was indifferent to his actions. On the fateful night of October 5, 2020, Charles met Maricela at a nightclub. After spending hours drinking and dancing, he invited her over, and she agreed. When they arrived at his place late at night, Na and Lisa were already asleep. Charles took Maricela to his room, where they engaged in intimate activities and later fell asleep. Charles claimed he was awakened by a noise and was disoriented, still intoxicated. When he turned on the light, he saw a horrific scene. Maricela's body had slid to the floor next to the bed, and she had bled out. Na entered the room, and they stood there for a few minutes, not trying to help the victim. When Charles regained his composure, he realized the crime might be pinned on him due to his criminal record, and his influential lovers could escape punishment. So, he agreed to help dispose of the body and cover up the crime. According to Lisa's lawyer, she had no motive to attack and kill Maricela. Lisa claimed her relationship with Charles was strictly business, and she viewed his promising music career as a good investment. She wasn't concerned about who he slept with or flirted with. However, Lisa did say that Charles was hot-tempered and cruel, especially when drunk. She claimed that on the night of the murder, Charles brought a new girl from the club, and an argument erupted. Charles grabbed a knife, and despite Lisa and Na's attempts to intervene, Maricela was killed. They helped dispose of the body and clean up the scene under the threat of becoming Charles's next victims. Lisa's friend testified that Lisa was obsessed with Charles and had repeatedly confessed to wanting to eliminate any girl who got close to him. The friend also mentioned an odd statue of Santa Muerte at Lisa's house, which Lisa claimed was for black magic to ensure Charles' devotion to her. However, it seemed the ritual failed, and Lisa resorted to using a knife. Another witness, a real estate agent, testified that Lisa and Na were eager to sell several properties they owned as quickly as possible, including their Dallas home, which was the site of the alleged crime. The court took into account Charles's full confession and cooperation with the investigation. Lisa Dyke Beltran was found guilty of the brutal crime against Maricela, concealing evidence, and attempting to flee. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Charles Beltran and Nina Morin fully admitted their guilt and agreed to cooperate with the investigation. They were found guilty of concealing evidence, and Nina was sentenced to 7 years in prison, with the possibility of release in 3 years due to good behavior. Charles, previously convicted on multiple occasions, was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 8 years.